case of Diana D. Aiello. Diana Aiello was born in 1959 in Tustin, a suburb of Los Angeles. Her father was in the military, and her mother worked at a local garment factory. At the age of 19, Diana met Kevin Green when Diana was harassed by several men at a bar. Kevin intervened and chased the men away. In gratitude, Diana bought Kevin a drink. They went on a date a few days later, and their relationship quickly progressed. Kevin was in the process of divorcing his first wife. Kevin and Diana moved in together for a while, and Diana became pregnant. After Kevin's divorce was finalized, they got married. While waiting for their daughter to be born, they rented an apartment in Tustin. Kevin worked as a helicopter mechanic at a nearby Marine Corps base, while Diana stayed home to prepare for the baby's arrival, having previously worked with her mother in a garment factory. By late September 1979, Diana was nearly 9 months pregnant. On the evening of September 30th, Kevin and Diana got into an argument after watching a movie together. The impending birth of their daughter had put a strain on their relationship. To calm down and avoid escalating the situation, Kevin decided to drive to a nearby restaurant. About 40 minutes after the incident, Kevin called the local police department to report that his wife, Diana, had been shot and needed immediate medical attention. Police arrived on the scene shortly after receiving the call. When they entered the apartment, they found Diana lying on the bed, covered in blood, with a head wound that appeared to be a gunshot wound. However, upon closer examination, paramedics later determined that the wound was actually caused by blunt force trauma. When the police checked on Diana, found her alive and provided first aid until the ambulance arrived, they asked Kevin to leave the room. After the paramedics took over, they carefully transported Diana to the hospital. Meanwhile, the police asked Kevin to stay behind to give a statement. He told police that he and his wife had been arguing, so he decided to leave the apartment to calm down and buy some burgers at a fast food restaurant. In his haste, he realized he had left his keys inside, but chose not to go back to get them. Instead, he locked the door and went to his car. As Kevin drove away from the apartment complex, he noticed a truck with its back door open and an African-American man walking back and forth toward the truck. It was late, around 2 a.m. He drove to the fast food restaurant he frequented, but it was busy, so he went to another location a few miles away. After buying a burger, he drove home, which took 40 minutes. When he arrived, he found the front door wide open. He rushed inside and found his wife, Diana, covered in blood. He immediately called the police. Kevin's story had some suspicious signs, but when the police checked the fast food bag, they found the food was still warm and the receipt confirmed the time and place of purchase, supporting Kevin's story. As a result, the police allowed Kevin to go to the hospital, but not before asking him to provide a blood sample for further investigation. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts could still compare the blood found at the crime scene with Kevin's blood type. When Diana arrived at the hospital, doctors determined that her head wound was not caused by a gunshot. Instead, it was likely inflicted by a small, heavy object. Unfortunately, Diana fell into a coma. The medical team worked diligently for several hours to save both her and her unborn child. After many hours of intense care, they were able to stabilize Diana's condition, but she still required surgery. During the investigation, police asked medical experts to determine whether Diana had been sexually assaulted. The experts confirmed that Diana had indeed been sexually assaulted, finding semen on her body. However, Kevin testified that he and Diana had had sex just hours before the argument. Diana and Kevin's family stayed in the hospital all night, and the next morning, the baby's condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. Doctors tried, but the baby did not survive. Although Diana remained in a coma, her chances of survival had improved. However, doctors warned that she could suffer long-term effects. Although Kevin had an alibi, police were not quick to clear him due to several inconsistencies in his story. He had an argument with Diana just hours before the attack, left his front door unlocked, and spent much of the time on a quick trip to a fast food restaurant. His claim of seeing a suspicious person near his home at night also raised suspicions. However, there was no concrete evidence linking Kevin to the crime. Police are investigating another suspect in a series of similar crimes in the area. A year earlier, a series of break-ins and assaults had occurred in Tustin and surrounding areas with similar modus operandi. In December 1978, a 17-year-old girl was killed after being beaten with a piece of wood and sexually assaulted. For months later, a 21-year-old woman was murdered and sexually assaulted. In July 1979, A woman was attacked in her apartment but survived, although she was in a coma for several weeks. Her testimony provided no new leads. Prior to Diana's attack, a similar attack occurred in September 1979, when a 34-year-old woman was murdered. A series of crimes occurred, all with striking similarities to the attack on Diana. The police believed they were dealing with a serial killer and focused their efforts on capturing him. To address the growing concern, the police decided to issue a public warning through the media, specifically targeting women living alone and those living in low-rise apartments, who appeared to be the serial killer's favorite targets. The warning caused panic, and in response, the police increased night patrols in the area. The police began by interviewing and soon received their first leads. Several of the victims' neighbors reported seeing a suspicious white man with thick black hair near their home. Although the description was somewhat vague, the police were able to identify several men who matched and investigate them. Unfortunately, these leads did not lead to any cases. A week after Diana was attacked, her doctors informed her loved ones that she had finally regained consciousness. However, there was a serious concern: Diana was unable to speak or remember anything. According to her doctors, her brain was still recovering. Around the same time, another attack occurred in Tustin. An unknown assailant broke into the apartment of a 24-year-old woman, striking her multiple times with a piece of wood and sexually assaulting her. Tragically, the victim died, and the police were once again unable to catch the perpetrator. Diana spent several days in the hospital, recovering from her injuries. During this time, her mind slowly cleared, but she had lost almost all of her memory. Doctors told her family that her memories might return, but warned them not to remind her of anything, letting her remember on her own. After being stabilized, Diana was discharged from the hospital and her family took her home. Her husband Kevin had to work at the military base, so Diana was sent to live with Diana's parents. 2 weeks later, another attack occurred in the city, similar to the one on Diana. This time, the attacker killed a 17-year-old girl. Diana began attending physical therapy sessions and her condition gradually improved. Although she still could not speak or remember the attack, a breakthrough occurred 6 weeks later during a therapy session. The doctor asked Diana if she could remember who attacked her. To the doctor's surprise, Diana suddenly pointed to her wedding ring. The doctor shared this information with Diana's mother when she came to pick her up. Diana's mother asked her daughter if her husband, Kevin, was the one who attacked her, and Diana nodded. Diana's mother immediately took her to the police station to speak with the chief. After asking Diana a few more questions, the police confirmed that she remembered her attacker and identified him as her husband, Kevin. This new information dramatically changed the course of the investigation. Police suspected that Diana's attack was related to a series of similar incidents in the area, committed by a serial offender. However, Kevin matched the suspect's description, leading police to question whether Kevin could be the culprit behind these attacks. The police asked Diana and her mother to pretend that Diana had not recovered her memory and to return home with Kevin, but they agreed to do so. Meanwhile, the police kept a close watch on Kevin, monitoring his every move in the hope of finding evidence of a crime linked to the serial murders. Crime scene testing revealed evidence under Diana's fingernails, where they found bloody skin particles, in addition to the attacker's semen. After analyzing the evidence, police found a match between the attacker's blood type and Kevin's blood sample, indicating that Kevin was the one who attacked Diana. As for a motive, police suspect that Diana's refusal to have sex with Kevin may have prompted the attack, although Kevin insists that they had sex earlier that night. The police spoke to Diana, and she remembered the attack clearly, confirming that Kevin was her killer. During the conversation, her mother expressed that they could no longer live with Kevin, and the police decided to arrest him. To protect Diana's family, Kevin was arrested at a store instead of at their home. Despite his arrest, Kevin maintained his innocence. Preparations for the trial lasted 10 months, during which time Diana's health gradually improved. She regained her ability to speak. Diana was cleared of the charges, and her husband was found guilty of assaulting her. Kevin's defense team tried to use his fast food alibi, but it was not enough to disprove Diana's testimony. As a result, Kevin was convicted in November 1980 of the child's murder and assault on Diana. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Police learned that 2 similar crimes had occurred in their district before Kevin was arrested, but both victims survived. Although the identity of the attacker remains unknown, these incidents raised suspicions that Kevin was involved in other crimes. The attack stopped abruptly after Kevin was arrested. After Kevin's sentencing, Diana promptly filed for divorce, which Kevin did not contest. Diana then focused on her recovery. When Kevin became eligible for parole, the committee denied his request, a decision that was repeated 3 more times. The serial killer case remained unsolved until 1996, when police reopened the investigation. Semen samples from the victims, which had been stored in a laboratory, were retested. Police wanted to determine who the culprit was, and DNA analysis yielded a surprising result. Gerald Parker, a man arrested the same year as Kevin, was found to have a DNA match to the serial murders. After the DNA match confirmed Parker's involvement in the serial murders, investigators re-examined the attack on Diana. Parker and Kevin worked together on a military base, and Parker owned a dark-colored van, similar to the one described in the attacks. During his initial police interview, Kevin reported seeing an African-American man near a dark-colored truck in front of their home on the day of the attack. This information led police to consider the possibility that Parker was involved in the attack on Diana. While Kevin was in jail, the local prosecutor updated him on the progress of the bedroom basher serial murder investigation. The prosecutor asked Kevin to provide a DNA sample, which he quickly agreed to. While the DNA analysis was underway, police visited Parker in prison to discuss the case. Although they had not yet formally charged him with the attacks, they hoped to gather more information. Parker initially denied any involvement in the crimes, so detectives focused their questioning on the attack on Diana. During questioning, Parker revealed that on the night of the incident, he drove his truck to Kevin's house, intending to circle the neighborhood, looking through the ground floor windows for a victim. However, this time, he heard screaming coming from Kevin and Diana's apartment, and when Kevin left the house, Parker noticed that the door was unlocked, so he waited a few minutes before entering the apartment and attacking Diana. Parker revealed that he did not know Kevin's wife because they worked in different areas of the military base. He also confessed to committing 6 murders and 3 non-fatal attacks. After Parker's confessions, DNA evidence confirmed his guilt and Kevin's innocence. The prosecutor quickly moved to overturn Kevin's sentence, and he was released from prison after 16 years. The case has caused widespread outrage, not only because an innocent man spent nearly half his life in prison, but also because it took so long for police to identify the real killer. When Kevin was released, the state of California paid him $10,000 in compensation, a relatively small amount. Years later, he received an additional $100 for each day he spent in prison, totaling $620,000 despite Kevin's exoneration. His wife Diana initially refused to believe he was innocent. She had previously claimed that Kevin was her only attacker. However, after DNA evidence from her body matched Parker's, she changed her story. Diana reported that Kevin attacked her before leaving the apartment, and then Parker entered and attacked her as well. However, Parker said that when he entered the house, Diana was lying on the bed without any injuries or signs of distress. He also admitted to hitting her on the head. Diana's family proposed an alternative theory, suggesting that Kevin might have conspired with Parker to commit the crime, which would explain why Kevin left the house that night, leaving the door open. However, Parker denied knowing Kevin, pointing out that the military base was large and many people didn't know each other personally. Parker denied knowing Kevin. Kevin also denied any involvement with Parker, insisting that he would never harm Diana or their unborn daughter. He explained that he left the door open because he didn't want to go back to get the keys after their argument, and he still blames himself for that decision. As for Parker, he was sentenced to death in 1999, but this sentence has yet to be carried out. After years of waiting on death row, California imposed a moratorium on executions, and as a result, Parker remains incarcerated to this day. Police sirens were heard throughout the Denver neighborhood on October 5, 1996, in response to a call about an apartment in the 1900 block of East 17th Avenue. Terry Turocek, a 35-year-old woman, was found dead inside. Terry was found by the police to have been strangled and had suffered serious head injuries. What could have happened between Terry and her attacker to cause her tragic death? And who could have committed such an evil act? With a population of 700,000, Denver, Colorado has a vibrant mix of history and culture that draws many visitors to its many museums. With a wealth of historical and recreational sites, this city seamlessly blends the old and the new. The small-town feel of Denver's neighborhoods is reflected in the welcoming locals who are known for their adventurous spirit and who frequently know their neighbors by name. However, Denver faces urban challenges, such as having one of the highest crime rates in the country. This problem casts a shadow over its tight-knit neighborhoods, The unsolved Terry Turocek case from 1996 serves as a sobering reminder of this darker side of the city's existence. Terry Turocek, who was born on May 14, 1961, was from Michigan's vast countryside. She was the daughter of James C. Turocek, a brave Vietnam War veteran and honorable surgeon in the U.S. Air Force. Possessed a resilient spirit as a child. While the specifics of Terry's mother, Marlene Elsikish, are still unknown, her father, James, was the epitome of a loving father to Terry despite his tough exterior as a military man. The fact that Terry wasn't an only child is well known. A few years later after her birth, her younger brother, James Turocek Jr., joined the family, and the two of them quickly developed a strong and close bond that lasted well into adulthood. As time unfolded, accepted motherhood with grace. She graciously with a man named Douglas in Oakland in 1979, and the couple was blessed with 3 kids. Her kids' names are unknown, but one thing was undeniable. Terry was a fantastic mother. James Jr. often recalled her maternal tendencies. Terry was always praised for the attention and love she gave to her children. As the years passed, Terry separated from her husband and had made a home at 1900 East 17th Avenue in Denver, Colorado. She had a complicated love life. Although she was in a primary relationship, there were rumors that she was open to other options. Terry's life was in a stable period with friends, family, and the typical ups and downs. She was maximizing her lifetime, but because of the rise and fall of life, it is impossible to predict what lies ahead. Therefore, no one could have predicted that Terry's happy times were coming to an end. Denver's residents appeared to be going about their daily lives on Friday, October 4, 1996, unaware of the impending tragedy. Terry Turocek completed her day at work and left for home with the intention of spending the evening with friends. She relished the solitude of her empty apartment while her kids were away. She got ready to partake in Denver's exciting nightlife as dusk fell. Around 8 o'clock, left her apartment. Her spirit coexisted peacefully with the city's spirit. There are traces of Terry's night scattered here and there. Around 11:30 p.m., a neighbor saw Terry coming home. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but time and events have a way of taking everyone by surprise. The next day, on Saturday, October 5th, the early morning sun casts long shadows over Terry's apartment building, which had become silent. Strangely, Terry's apartment door remained open. After hours passed, a worried neighbor didn't see the open door until the noon sun reached its highest point. He might have assumed she had overslept or that she was taking the shower. Just to be sure, he peered into Terry's apartment and shouted out her name, but he heard no response despite his voice resonating throughout the living room. Terry was nowhere to be found when a quick search of the living room and kitchen was conducted. The neighbor then made an attempt to do a last stop at her bedroom. He, however, couldn't believe what he saw when he arrived. Terry, who he had just seen the previous evening when she was vivacious and alive, now laid lifeless on the floor of her bedroom. His fear increased. He scrambled for his phone as he hurried outside and dialed 911. His voice trembled in shock as he spoke to the operator. Police sirens could be heard in the distance, getting louder and louder until there was a discord outside Terry's apartment. Police officers who had mastered composure intervened to take control while masking their internal dread. The scene, which featured a life lost too soon, a shocked community, and a family left in agony, was all too common. When Terry Turocek's body was found, her case was launched immediately. The entire community was affected, not just her family. Detectives from the Denver Police Department led the investigation to find out what caused this sinister discovery. They understood the significance of the scene in front of them right away. The bedroom depicts a violent story. There were obvious indications of a struggle, suggesting that Terry had fought hard for her life. In an effort to fill in the blanks of that fateful night, neighbors mentioned disturbances between 1 o'clock and 1:30 m. The door to Terry's apartment was obviously left open, a spooky invitation to the horror inside, but nobody had reported seeing anyone leave. Detectives speculated that the perpetrator might have known Terry or had gained her trust in order to take advantage of it in the most wicked way. Given that there was no sign of forced entry, the medical examiner, Dr. T. Henry, had the grim duty of looking over Terry's body. The outcomes were unexpected. Terry had been severely assaulted in addition to being killed. Her death was attributed to strangulation, but there was also evidence of blunt force trauma, making for a horrifying end to a life that had otherwise been full of promise. A hair found on Terry's thighs stood out as detectives searched Terry's body. They hoped that this small strand of hair would hold the key to discovering who killed her. Investigators connected with Terry's friends and neighbors to piece together the story, and it didn't take long for perplexing tidbits of information to start to emerge. Around 11:30 p.m., Terry was last seen entering her apartment, and a neighbor noticed she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by an African-American man with a unique afro. It was unknown if he was a friend or enemy, but he was the last person seen with Terry. The timeline was further complicated when a different neighbor reported hearing noises coming from Terry's apartment around 12:30 a.m. It's interesting to note that Terry was observed knocking on another neighbor's door at 1 o'clock a.m., appearing to be hurt and pleading asking for money. Could this be connected to the man she was seen earlier with, Terry's boyfriend, whose identity was kept private, provided the information that was the most revealing? While he had a story from the week before that raised questions, he had an alibi for the night of the murder. Terry and her boyfriend had been robbed and assaulted inside Terry's apartment by 3 unidentified African-American men. Was this incident related to her eventual homicide in any way? The detectives were plagued by that question. The weeks that followed saw the pursuit of leads. Terry was seen with a mysterious man who later became a person of interest. Was he related to the assault from the previous week? Or was Terry's request for cash that night somehow connected to him? Despite the police's best efforts, the reliable evidence required to identify a suspect eluded them. Even though a key suspect was brought in and subjected to questioning and DNA testing, disappointment sets in when the results were revealed. It did not match his DNA. With each passing day, the community's suffering grew worse. For clarification and some semblance of justice, the neighborhood looked to the detectives. The loss of Terry left her family devastated, and they clung to the hope that the offender would be caught and punished. But as the weeks turned into months, the once shining trail started to fade. Despite their best efforts, the detectives had to face the harsh possibility that they might never catch Terry's killer. Sadly, leads that had once shown promise dwindled, and the case became unproductive. However, the cold and seemingly unsolvable case experienced a sudden and unexpected resurgence in 2004. Time's fails, which had concealed clues and obscured the way to justice, were now starting to lift. Nearly 10 years after the horrifying incident, in August of that year, there was a significant development. The hit was detected by the Cody's DNA system, a comprehensive database that contains DNA profiles from all over the country. It matched the DNA evidence that had been taken years earlier from Terry's body. For the investigators, this DNA had always been a loose end, a piece of the puzzle that wouldn't fit anywhere. But now there was a lead. The investigation into this reopened case was given to Detective Dixie, an experienced detective. She was determined to follow this new lead and see where the investigation would go, and this DNA trail led them right to Ricky Dawson, thanks to her analytical mind and methodical approach. Ricky had experience with the law. His DNA was already present in the Cody's database, which suggested that he had a criminal history. An African-American man named Ricky Dawson unexpectedly found himself at the center of this investigation. After many years, the Terry Turochik case was once again the focus of the attention of the law enforcement community. Now that they had a new lead and a rekindled seal, it was hoped that this new lead would finally put an end to a troubling chapter in the city's past and bring justice to a person who had been wronged. With a name and a face to work with, Detective Dixie started attempting to understand the relationship between Terry and Dawson. Did they have a mutual relationship? Was there a reason behind the killing? Were there any additional pieces of proof or witnesses that the initial investigation might have missed? The case, which was once a terrifying puzzle covered in a layer of mystery, had changed into a maze of connections that were just waiting to be explored. As Detective Dixie dug deeper, it became clear that the task at hand was to confirm the DNA match, establish the story, and create a solid case against the new prime suspect. The Denver streets, where rumors and theories about the case once circulated, now awaited news over the case. They eagerly anticipated the day when they would declare Terry had received justice. The majority of the city was upbeat, but there were still many obstacles to be overcome. Although compelling, DNA evidence is not the be-all and end-all of a criminal case. Finding a suspect is one thing, but establishing their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt is quite another. On January 24, 1961, in Florida, Ricky Dawson, a man whose life seemed to contain both darkness and light, was born. In 2004, he was 43 years old. It indicates that he was 35 at the time of Terry Turochik's tragic death in 1996. Terry wasn't his only link to the dark, though. Dawson had his own difficulties when he was younger. there were complications throughout his childhood. It's been said that a person's behavior as a child often provides a window into their future, and Ricky was no exception. His marital status, education, and other personal information are still unknown, but his criminal record is one thing that stands out. The criminal activity that Dawson is involved in is not just in Terry's case. His DNA was discovered to match an unnamed profile from a terrifying case that occurred in Seattle in 2000. Debbie Cascio, a 40-year-old woman, was his victim. The tragic circumstances surrounding Terry's death and Debbie's are similar. Like Terry, Debbie had multiple blunt force traumas and was in pain. Debbie was strangled and had multiple blunt force injuries like Terry as well. The unfortunate relationship between the two women and Ricky Dawson attracted the attention of the law. Once more, the city and Debbie's devoted daughter, Tabitha Johnson, both worked to preserve her memory as a gesture by the Homeless Remembrance Project to ensure Debbie's story is never forgotten. A leaf of remembrance at the Seattle Justice Center bears her name. Tabitha, who was only 11 years old when her mother died, has been a model of tenacity. She recalls memories of her mother, including times spent at the beach or creating art with glass. Even after becoming a mother herself, Tabitha is still grieving Debbie's loss. Despite her desire for closure and justice, the specifics of her mother's case are still unknown because the Seattle police haven't disclosed more information. The criminal activities of Ricky Dawson continued beyond Seattle and Denver. In 2004, he ended up in Florida's police custody. At that time, Denver police learned that a DNA match connected him to the 1996 Terry Turchak cold case. While in Florida, he admitted guilt to second-degree murder in exchange for a 25-year prison term. Now he is charged with first-degree murder in connection with the Terry Turchak case in Denver. The investigation into Terry Turchak's murder accelerated as soon as Ricky Dawson's name appeared. Detectives searched for any mention of Ricky in the case files and interview transcripts from the initial investigation. Although they weren't able to find his name right away, they were in for a surprise. Ricky's description of the man Harry was with the night she was killed matched that provided by her neighbors. Ricky's criminal history was quickly revealed and it was shocking. He was a persistent offender. His name was associated with a long list of crimes. Detectives recognized him as a key suspect in Terry Turchak's case and knew they needed to speak with him. At the Suwannee Correctional Facility in Florida, where Ricky Dawson was already incarcerated, they came face to face with him in December 2004. Finding out what Ricky knew about Terry and proving his involvement in her tragic demise were detectives' stated objectives. During the interview, another intriguing lead emerged. A friend of Ricky's whose name was withheld gave his account about the night Terry was killed. Terry was well acquainted with Ricky's friend. He acknowledged spending time in her apartment with her and Ricky and even confirmed being there the night she was reported killed. He claimed that all three of them had used drugs. Even though he said he left at midnight, he wasn't aware of what happened next. The puzzle was beginning to come together. A path had now been set out in front of the detectives. They performed an important DNA test. The new DNA samples obtained from Ricky were compared to the major DNA profile of the hair discovered on Terry's body, and there was a match. With this concrete proof, Ricky Dawson's involvement in Terry's death was established. But unexpectedly, no charges were brought against him for her killing right away. Some speculated that this was because Ricky had already served about 20 years of his current sentence. As a result, Terry's case sat idle for more than 10 more years. 14 years later, a new hope for justice surfaced. Detective John McGrail from the Denver Police Cold Case Unit was tasked with reviewing the case. McGrail examined the case's details and came to the conclusion that the evidence present was quite convincing. In some ways, the case appeared to be settled. In order to cover all bases, he decided to submit the evidence for additional laboratory testing in December 2018. This included evidence gathered from the crime scene and Terry's post-mortem examination results. By August 2019, the DNA evidence findings had produced a solid match. The wheels of justice began to turn more quickly. Ricky Dawson, the Ricky who had been serving time in Florida's prison for a different crime, was the only person in whom the puzzle pieces pointed. With the fresh evidence in hand, it was obvious that it was time to hold Dawson accountable for the murder of Terry. Time travel to January 26, 2023, which was an important day in the investigation. Ricky Dawson was officially charged with the first-degree murder of Terry Turchak, and an arrest warrant was issued for him. At the age of 62, Ricky discovered himself in a more difficult legal situation. Even though he was already detained in Florida, justice did not stand still. The Denver Police Department obtained his extradition so that he could answer for his actions in Denver. On February 23rd, when Ricky learned of the allegations against him, the seriousness of the situation hit him. March 23rd, 2023 was designated as the date of the court appearance, which was eagerly anticipated. Many people anticipate Ricky Dawson will be found guilty for his role in Terry's tragic death. Despite the fact that the court's final decision has not yet been made public, they felt this way because of the mounting evidence against him. James Turchak, Terry's brother, never fully recovered from the pain of losing his sister in 1996. He struggled for 27 long years, torn between hope and despair, wondering if Terry's premature death would ever bring about justice. James, however, was overcome by a wave of emotions after hearing the recent news of an arrest in relation to the murder of his sister. James spoke to the media about his unwavering dedication to his sister's case and how he had always held on to the hope that the truth would eventually surface. James became more aware of the seriousness of the situation when he learned that the alleged offender was being extradited to stand trial. He addressed the hole Terry's absence had left, calling it an irreplaceable loss that time would never fill. He often pondered the life experiences she passed up, particularly the joy of becoming a grandmother. James finally recalled that Terry had a contagious spirit that affected everyone she knew. James acknowledged that despite having a desire for forgiveness, he is still working on it. It is a challenging journey because the pain is still too recent. Above all else, he made clear that he wanted justice to win. James wants to see Terry's memory honored by the justice she deserved 52 years ago, by making sure Ricky Dawson faces the full force of the law and is imprisoned for the rest of his days. The case of Sharon Collins. On September 26, 2006, police were alerted to a break-in at a business in Westgate Business Park, Ennis, Eau Claire. The office belonged to Downs and Howard, property investment firm owned by Howard Howard and his sons. He was believed to be wealthy. The police received a call about a robbery in rural Ireland, which unfortunately was not uncommon. However, upon arrival, they found the crime scene to be unusual. There were no signs of forced entry, such as broken doors or windows. The office locks had been opened with keys, and the alarm had been deactivated with a code the previous night at 9:24 p.m. Stolen items included a laptop, a desktop computer CPU, computer cables, and an old Irish money poster. Strangely, the safe in the office was left untouched, adding to the mystery. Later that evening, the police got a call from Robert Howard, one of Howard's sons, reporting that a strange man had shown up at his house and demanded money. What began as a basic robbery call was now unraveling into an unusual and bizarre story in Irish criminal history. Just days after the robbery, a suspect, Robert, who was an Egyptian national living in Las Vegas, was arrested in Ennis, along with his wife, Teresa Engel, an American. Robert claimed that a man named Tony came to his house, demanded money, and threatened his life, as well as the lives of his father and brother. Tony said the hit could be called off if Robert paid 100,000 euros. Robert refused, called the police, and Tony was taken into custody. On February 26, 2007, Sharon Collins, Howard's partner and purported surrogate mother to his two adult sons, was arrested. This was based on information found on two gateway computers discovered during an FBI investigation into Tony. The computers revealed a series of emails between two individuals, with one person using the email address lyingeyes98@yahoo.ie to arrange the contract killing of the Howard men. The emails also mentioned a FedEx package sent to a Las Vegas address with a down payment of 15,000 euros for the hit. Upon investigation, it was found that Sharon had indeed withdrawn 15,000 euros from her credit union and bank accounts. Sharon completely denies having any contact with Tony. She acknowledged sending the money, but claimed it was due to blackmail, possibly by a woman whom she met online. Howard wrote to the DPP requesting no charges against Sharon, asserting she wasn't involved in the murder plot. Several individuals, including Sharon Collins, contacted the DPP about the case. Sharon wrote to them 3 times detailing her case. She detailed her life, explaining how she got married at 19 and had 2 sons before separating and eventually getting divorced. In November 1998, she met Howard, and they moved in with her 2 sons before Christmas. This worried me because they lived together like a married couple, but were never officially married because Howard was worried about his sons inheriting his business and fortune. In Ireland, a spouse is entitled to 1/3 of an estate regardless of a will. Sharon was pressuring Howard to have a church wedding due to her previous marriage being annulled and Howard being a widower. They were advised that this could lead to a claim on Howard's estate. Instead, they settled for exchanging vows in a church in Italy, signing a document acknowledging it was not a legal marriage. Despite this, they acted as a married couple and held a reception party when they returned home. Sharon misled guests into thinking they were legally married. Howard and Sharon generally got along well, but they had strong personalities and often disagreed. In December 2005, Sharon mentioned meeting a woman named Maria Marconi online. Sharon confided in Maria about the arguments in her relationship with Howard. The two of them first connected when Sharon filled out a form online regarding working from home. Among many other emails, one in particular caught her attention: an invitation from a popular author to help her write a novel. Sharon filled out the form and returned it. Not long after, Maria Marconi contacted her, offering to mentor her. Over time, Sharon and Maria became friends, and Sharon started sharing more personal details with her. Sharon mentioned she hadn't informed Howard about Maria, as she wanted to wait and see how things progressed before bringing up her book project. During this period, she found the writing exercises helpful and therapeutic. Sharon wrote in a letter to the DPP that in April 2006, she and Howard had a disagreement, leading her to send an email to Maria, where she expressed her anger towards Howard by calling him names and stating that she hated him. Sharon met Maria Marconi in June 2007 during a holiday in Ireland. Maria was a woman in her late 40s with straight brown hair, sallow skin, and about average height. They traveled around Clare together, and Maria used a computer in Howard's office at Ballyback House. The next month, Maria contacted Sharon to inform her that her house had been robbed and her laptop stolen. Following this incident, Sharon started receiving strange emails from a man threatening to harm Howard and his sons for money or if she didn't pay. The man knew personal details about her life, which frightened Sharon. She was then told to give 20,000 euros to prevent the letter to Maria Marconi from being sent to Howard. She received phone calls and emails asking for the money, so she decided to send it in hopes of solving the issue. The night after sending the money, on August 16, 2007, she traveled to Spain thinking it was all over. However, she continued to receive demands for more money through phone calls and emails. She visited an internet cafe to contact Maria, but upon logging in, she realized all her emails and contacts were gone. Upon learning that Howard's office had been burglarized and the computers were stolen, she remembered that her password was saved on one of the computers, suspecting that's how her emails were deleted. She told the DPP also that when she had been brought in to speak to the police, they had read emails that they said were from her to a man named Tony. She told them she recognized parts of the emails and that some of what she had written to Maria might have been lifted word for word and had been added to make it look like Sharon herself was conspiring to have the Howard men murdered. Sharon's next two letters were much shorter compared to her previous ones. In those letters, she mentioned that she would not have used her real name, her personal computer, or the computer at Howard's office. Sharon believed that all these factors made it impossible for her to have committed the crime. She admitted that she was foolish, deceived, and manipulated. In hindsight, she realized that she should have confessed much earlier and told the truth. Sharon regretted not informing Howard about the incident when it occurred. She also said that she had nothing to gain from the Howard's murders. She was not properly named nanny and would not have had any claim on Howard's estate since they were not married. In fact, if anything, Howard's death would mean that her source of income would be gone. She pleaded with the DPP not to press charges and to trust that she had acted foolishly, but had not intended to kill. The DPP did not heed Howard or Sharon's advice. On June 26, 2007, the district court proceedings began. This court convenes 9 times a year, but today it was packed with photographers and journalists. Sharon, aged 44, was scheduled to appear in court. Additionally, it was reported that an Egyptian national residing in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA was also present in court. He had been accused of attempting to extort 100,000 euros, robbery, and dealing with stolen goods. However, those charges were dismissed in the morning. Upon leaving the courtroom, he was promptly rearrested for conspiracy to commit murder. Tony was taken by the police to Kilka to face these charges alongside Sharon. Both were brought before the court and formally charged with conspiring to kill Howard and his 2 sons, Robert and Neil. It's worth noting that each of the accused were granted free legal aid, and so the cost of the case was falling on the state, which in turn cost the taxpayer. So with 12 solicitors, the accused, police involved in the case, family members and press, the courtroom was packed to the gills, and the judge was not a happy guy. So the following week, the case has moved to a much bigger venue. Sharon faced 3 charges of conspiracy to murder and faced another 3 charges of soliciting Tony to murder the 3 men. Tony was recharged with making an unwarranted demand for €100,000 from Robert Howard, trespassing at the Howard's business premises, theft, and handling stolen goods. The 2 of them pleaded not guilty to each of the charges. The jury learned that the investigating officers had collected a lot of information and evidence with help from the FBI in the United States while they were investigating Tony for similar charges. According to the prosecution, Tony, also known as Tony Luciano, was asked by Sharon to kill the Howard men. Sharon had also obtained a proxy marriage certificate from Mexico for herself and Howard, which he paid €1,000 for without Howard's knowledge. She used this to apply for and receive an Irish passport in the name of Sharon Howard. Sharon had posted the keys to the Harrods business offices to Tony, and he used these to gain access and steal the computers that had evidence of Sharon's contact with him. Along with the keys, she sent him photographs and money. Robert had gone to the offices of his family business and noticed that the door was unlocked, and the alarm was no longer set. He saw that 2 computers were missing. Later that night, around 10:30 p.m., he received a phone call at home from a man he didn't know, who said he had heard that Robert lost a few computers. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and when Robert opened it, he found a man calling himself Tony, who had one of the computers. Robert took the computer into the house and informed his brother Neil, who was also indoors, to contact the police. After coming back to the front door where Tony was waiting, Tony revealed that he had been hired to harm Robert, Neil, and their father Howard for €130,000, but he refused to comply. Tony proposed to cancel the contract for €100,000, which the Howard family agreed to pay. Tony showed Robert photographs of the Howards and a piece of paper with various directions to their houses. Robert was a little freaked, hoping the police would arrive soon before Tony tried to leave, which he did. Robert ended up following Tony, but lost him at the crossroads. Later, at around 12:30 a.m., Robert received another phone call from Tony, asking if he had started to get the money together, and there were several other calls the next day along the same lines. They made plans to meet at a hotel in Ennis for Robert to hand over the money, and Robert told the police about this. On the evening of the September 27, 2006, Robert went to the hotel bar. He got another call telling him to meet a woman near the hotel bathrooms as she would be collecting the money from him. This woman was Teresa, Tony's wife. When he got to the bathrooms, a woman asked him if he had the envelope, and just then, a plainclothes police passed them, and the woman took off without the money. The undercover female police followed Teresa, and she was seen talking to a man outside the hotel. They both went their separate ways, and the man headed to a pub across the road from the hotel. The police approached the man and arrested him there and then. This man was Tony. Teresa was arrested in the hotel car park. Howard supported Sharon during the investigation, arrest, and trial. On the stand, he expressed confusion as to why Sharon would be involved, stating she was not a greedy person and had never asked him for anything. He mentioned that shortly after the office break-in, Sharon informed him she was being blackmailed by Maria Marconi. Howard explained that he had asked Sharon to go to Las Vegas in order to hire a private investigator to locate Maria Marconi, but she was not successful in doing so. He also mentioned that he did not book the 2 flights from Las Vegas to Shannon Airport that were charged to his American Express credit card, which coincided with flights taken by Tony and Teresa. Howard revealed that Sharon had his credit card information and took care of the payments. But unfortunately, her purse containing the details was stolen in Spain, either in August or February. He suspected that the thief was Teresa. After Howard finished his testimony, he left the stand and crossed the courtroom where he gave Sharon a kiss on the lips. This caused a sensation amongst the media. He then left the courtroom and did not attend the rest of the trial. On Thursday, June, Teresa Engel took to the stand, and it was established that she had been granted immunity for her testimony. They went through her background, and she had met Tony in February 2003 or February 2004 at a casino in Detroit near where she lived at the time. In June 2006, she moved to Las Vegas to live with Tony, and they got married. She, Tony, and another woman named Lisa all lived together. Lisa was Tony's first wife. Teresa mentioned that she had visited Ireland before, saying Tony had sent her there in response to emails he received from a woman seeking 3 men to be killed. She remembered receiving a cash payment of €15,000 delivered by FedEx. In Ireland, she met Tony's friend Ash in Ennis, who was supposed to poison the alcohol in Howard's office to kill the Howard sons. However, Ash ultimately decided not to go through with the plan and left. When the FBI were investigating Tony over fraud and extortion in the States, they had found evidence of the manufacturing of racing in the house that he lived in. And so this information was given in court in Ireland. The fraud and extortion in this case in the US was similar to the one in Ireland involving Sharon. Teresa had told a woman that her partner's ex had taken out a hit on her and that she'd be killed if she didn't send it $20,000. Obviously, rather than pay out the money to these people, she went to the cops. It turned out the ex-girlfriend had paid out $17,000 after finding Tony on the hitman for her website that he had set up. Teresa pleaded guilty and was eventually in February 2008 sentenced to 8 months in prison. The next part of the story is another humdinger as it involves the popular radio show personality Jerry Ryan, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but anyone Irish would have known him, and the producer of his show, C.O. Ben Hoff. You see, our Sharon had wrote an email to the show outlining her relationship with Howard. This email was only partially recovered, and so they brought Jerry Ryan and C. Ben Hoff to the stand. But they stated they'd get over 2,000 emails a month, and neither of them remember seeing the email. The email stated that Howard visited prostitutes, as well as individuals Sharon referred to as transvestites. He asked her to engage in sexual activity that made her uncomfortable. Sharon mentioned that he had awful moods when he didn't get his way, and she could no longer tolerate it, although she was afraid to leave. Personally, I believe she was hesitant to abandon the lifestyle to which she was accustomed, but I may just be cynical. She mentioned in her letter to the show that she wanted to create a situation where she could end her current relationship. The email suggested 2 possibilities. Either Sharon was truly unhappy in her relationship, giving her a possible motive for murder, or she was lying and willing to tarnish her partner's reputation to gain sympathy. Maybe Sharon was hiding her true self. The prosecution argued during their closing statement that bringing in Jerry Ryan was unnecessary and irrelevant, claiming it was just a ploy by Sharon to attract more attention. On the July 1st, the day had finally come that everyone had been waiting on. Sharon was the next up in the witness box. Next up was the prosecution to cross-examine Sharon. Everything that was put to her was denied, including how she organized the break-in at the Howard's office, how she paid the down payment of 15,000 euros for the hit, and claiming it was the money to pay the blackmailer, and how the Lying Eyes 98 email address didn't belong to her. She was accused of making up the person Maria Marconi to cover her tracks. She claimed that the phone calls she exchanged were with a woman and not a man. Sharon remained cool and collected during the cross-examination. She made sure to smile at the jury and played the part of an innocent person. However, the next day, Sharon was a different woman in the court. She appeared drawn and lacked the confidence she had shown the previous day. The prosecution grilled her and went through her actions in detail. Sharon was unable to give clear explanations regarding the communication between the Lying Eyes account and the hitman, followed by a quick switch to her personal email from the same computer. She also could not clarify the searches on her laptop at Ballabeg House regarding inheritance, mortgages, and women's aid. Additionally, she had no explanation for the 15,000 euros tracking number used right after interactions between the Lying Eyes 98 and the hitman account. The defense argued that the police were biased in their investigation and only looked for evidence to make Sharon appear guilty. They mentioned phone data and records that were never thoroughly examined, which could have shown that someone else was in the house while Sharon and Howard were away. After the judge summed up the case, the jury deliberated for hours. Each counsel had requests for the judge. The jury spoke on the case and were retired to a hotel. The next day, the judge recharged the jury, and deliberations continued. On the 3rd day, finally, a decision was made. Early afternoon, the jury filed into the courtroom and delivered their verdict on 7 charges. Sharon had been found guilty of 3 charges relating to the soliciting the murder of the 3 men, Howard, Robert, and Neil. She had also been found guilty of charges relating to demanding €100,000 from Robert to cancel the contract of killing all 3 of them, but not guilty of the robbery of the Howard officers. Sharon broke down in tears as the jury returned to deliberate further on the outstanding charges. By 3 p.m., the jury returned and found her guilty of the conspiracy to murder counts. By 6 p.m., they returned and ultimately could not reach a decision regarding the guilt or innocence of Tony on those counts. Both were remanded in custody to await sentencing. And for the first time, Sharon was going to spend time in prison. On Monday, November 5th, Sharon and Tony went to court for sentencing. Sharon maintained her innocence as she faced the judge again. Howard also spoke to the judge, saying he still supported Sharon and didn't think she could have planned to kill him. It was taken into account that Sharon had no previous record. But obviously, it wasn't taken into account that she'd never admitted to her guilt when sentencing. She was sentenced to 6 years in total and would serve 4 years and 9 months. Tony was sentenced to 6 years in total also and took his sentencing all in his stride. I suppose compared to US prisons, ours are like a holiday camp. It was backdated to February 2006. Howard expended nearly €200,000 on a private detective in an attempt to obtain fresh evidence for Sharon's appeal. But it was unsuccessful. Sharon was eventually set free in September 2012, and in 2015, she granted an interview to the Irish Independent newspaper after relocating to Belfast, Northern Ireland. Throughout, she continued to assert her innocence and contemplated writing a book to share her perspective, but ultimately opted for a low-key lifestyle, aspiring to lead a peaceful existence. During her time in prison, she obtained certification in sports massage therapy and now works as a professional dog walker. She only intended to stay in Belfast for a short while, but she made such good friends up there that she decided to stay. Howard stood by her all the time she was in prison, but after she got out, the relationship fizzled out and they both went their own way. Howard went to Spain to recover, and to this day spends most of his time there, while his 2 sons still manage a thriving business despite everything that went on. In 2016, Eve gave an interview to the Sunday World newspaper. He returned to his native Egypt, where he is now a cattle farmer, and had some harsh words for Sharon. He spoke of her statement that everyone deserves a second chance, saying that applies only to people who admit what they did wrong. Tony was extradited back to the States while in custody as he faced charges of extortion. Once he had served his time in the US, he attempted to put his life back together. He did become ill, and after no one came to visit him in the hospital, he realized his life in the US was over after spending 32 years there, and he returned to his native Egypt. It's hard to believe that Sharon fell for the scam. She would have considered herself as intelligent and a computer expert, having taken a course in 1982. However, the computers of February 2006 were a different ballgame. Metadata, cell data, browsing history, and so on were just about to become mainstream. Nowadays, we nearly all know that data is kept, and our every movement can be traced. And yet, we still have people who make these mistakes and leave a treasure trove of evidence. Central High School, Knoxville, Tennessee. The football stadium lights up and the energy is high as everyone turns up to support their home team, the Bobcats. The marching band and cheerleaders keep the entertainment going and the energy up for the crowd. Some say the school revolves around football and the community spirit is always strong when the team plays. In the autumn of 2014, there was a new cheerleader on the team. 14-year-old Emma Walker was the only freshman to make the team that year. Described as passionate, spirited and fun with an infectious smile, Emma threw herself into cheerleading and took it very seriously. She adored being in that environment. She was kind, caring and high-achieving with hopes of one day becoming a neonatal nurse, caring for sick or premature newborn babies. One evening while Emma was cheering, she caught the attention of Central High's wide receiver, William Riley Gall, known as Riley. He spotted her from the sidelines and the attraction between the pair was instant. Riley, 2 years her senior, was also a top-performing and popular student. He was a member of the community church, loved video games, and his friends said he was a bit of a joker and not at all the stereotypical jock type. At the time, was already in a relationship, but he soon broke it off to begin dating Emma. The football star and cheerleader became the quintessential popular high school couple. Riley clicked with Emma's family. Her parents said he was like the boy next door, polite, well-mannered and likable. But their attitude quickly changed when they found out that Riley was keeping his promise to take his ex-girlfriend to the junior year prom. And then he was taking Emma to the senior year prom. This didn't sit well with Emma's parents, and they were concerned that his priorities didn't lie with their daughter. But Emma wasn't concerned. Her social media account was often flooded with pictures of the young couple. The pair would upload loving photos and silly selfies. Emma's friends, however, said they didn't find it easy to get to know Riley, but thought this was down to him being shy and more reserved. But as time passed, friends of Emma said they stopped justifying his behavior and started to find it a bit more concerning. Many of Emma's friends said it became obvious that Riley didn't want Emma engaging with anyone that wasn't him. He became controlling, possessive, and jealous. Emma's friends voiced their concerns, but Emma brushed it off and told them they didn't need to worry. Emma's parents took away her phone in a bid to stop the toxicity, but Riley gave Emma an iPod Touch, so she was able to secretly text him through the Wi-Fi without her parents suspecting anything. For the next 2 years, Emma and Riley would be on and off numerous times, and relationship was becoming more toxic and tumultuous. Each breakup was more dramatic than the last, and the young pair would frequently get into nasty arguments. Riley would send message after message and call her constantly. He was always bombarding her, waiting outside her work for hours until she finished. He once said to her, "You're dead to me. I'll check the obituary." But for every nasty message, it would soon be followed by an apology. "I'm sorry for however I act. I love you more than words can describe," he would say. Emma's parents, Mark and Jill, said they tried to convince Emma to break off the relationship many times. Jill said he had a way of isolating her and making her think that he was the only one. The more they told Emma to break it off, the more they all butted heads. By the autumn of 2016, to everyone's unease, and Riley's relationship was still the same. Riley had graduated and was a freshman at Maryville College, about 30 minutes away, and 16-year-old Emma was in her junior year of high school. Around Halloween that year, in a desperate bid to help their daughter, Emma's parents decided to ground her, not allowing her to leave the house unless it was to go to school or cheerleading. They started monitoring everywhere she went and everyone she spoke to, and to their surprise, it seemed to have the positive effect they were hoping for. Mark said she was like her old self again. She would spend time with the family, socializing and eating dinner with everyone. Emma had even texted her friend Keegan to say that she and Riley were done for good after she had seen pictures of him with other girls at college. Keegan and other friends breathed a sigh of relief. As everyone expected, Riley did not take the breakup well. Friday, November 18th, 2016. Emma was allowed out to go to a gathering at a friend's house. At around 11:30 p.m., her friend Zach arrived at the house. He was met by Emma, who quickly pulled him inside. She told him she had been receiving strange text messages from a number she didn't know. One of the messages said, "Come outside alone if you don't want to see a loved one get hurt. Go to your car with your keys. If you don't comply, I will hurt them." Emma thought it was one of Riley's friends playing a strange prank on her. She texted back, threatening to call the police. This didn't deter anything, and the messages got more disturbing. Emma then got a message saying Riley had been dropped outside the house. Emma and Zach ran outside, and sure enough, they saw someone lying face down in a ditch near the house. It was Riley. When the pair reached him, he was holding his head and seemed confused. He said he had been kidnapped and didn't know how he got there. Emma was crying and told Riley they had broken up and he needed to leave her alone. Dejected, Riley walked off down the street alone. He then called his friend Noah, telling him he had been kidnapped. Noah didn't believe a word. Emma, feeling uneasy, stayed with her friends that night. The following morning, just after 10 a.m., she drove home with her friend Haley, who lived close to the Walkers. While driving, they spotted a man dressed all in black, walking around on Emma Street. Emma dropped Haley at her house and drove back home herself. Emma was going to meet her mom Jill and started getting ready inside. But the mystery man soon came back and started ringing the doorbell and banging on the door. Emma was frantic and texted her friends. She also messaged the one person she believed would come to her rescue, Riley. She said, "I hate you, but I need you right now." He replied saying he was speeding over to help her. When Riley arrived, the mystery man had disappeared. Emma's friend, Haley, knew who the man was. She said there was no doubt it was Riley. This was also confirmed when she saw his car parked nearby. She even texted Riley asking what he was doing lurking around near Emma's house, but Riley denied it was him. Jill Walker returned home looking for Emma. She found her daughter and Riley talking in the front yard. Jill reminded him he wasn't allowed to come near the house and told him to leave. Emma was visibly shaken and was worried it could have been a burglar. Wasn't convinced and knew this wasn't a coincidence. But Emma reassured Jill. She knew Riley had nothing to do with what happened. After this incident, Jill and Mark were so concerned for their daughter, they took her to work on her Sunday morning shift. They waited until she'd finished and drove back home with her. Sunday night, November 20th, 2016. Everything in the Walker household appeared quiet and calm. Emma spoke to her friend Keegan about an assignment that was due and then headed for bed around midnight. A few minutes past midnight, Riley, who was back in Maryville, asked to borrow his roommate's phone. Using this phone, he called Emma. Riley alleged that during this call, Emma had told him she had no interest in getting back together with him, and the conversation abruptly ended. After this, Riley sent her countless texts and called around 40 times, leaving numerous voicemails. Emma didn't respond, and Riley eventually stopped trying to make contact. During the night, Emma's dad woke up after hearing what sounded like someone in the house and a door slamming twice. He checked around, looking in Emma and her brother Evan's bedrooms, but he couldn't see or hear anything and nothing seemed disturbed. Thinking he'd just imagined the sounds, he went back to bed. Around 6 a.m., Jill went into Emma's room to wake her up for school. Jill said her name, but Emma didn't respond. She reached out and touched her leg, but Emma still didn't move. When Jill looked at Emma's face, she said she knew she needed to call an ambulance. Emma was pale and her lips were blue. Jill checked for a pulse, but felt nothing. 16-year-old Emma Walker was dead. Police soon arrived at the Walker house. A small amount of blood was near Emma's mouth and it looked as though she may have vomited, possibly due to ingesting something. However, police noticed a small hole in the wall of Emma's bedroom, which pointed them elsewhere. It was a bullet hole. Someone had shot Emma in the head through the wall while she was sleeping. 2 shell casings were found outside the home and police needed to work out where the second shot was fired. Walking around the outside of the house, police eventually found the second bullet hole at approximately the same height as the first. This shot was also fired into Emma's bedroom just by her bed. The gunshots had been fired from as close as 4 or 5 feet from Emma's bedroom window between 2:30 and 3 a.m. One bullet had hit her behind her left ear, likely killing her instantly, and the second bullet had lodged in her pillow. Whoever the shooter was knew the layout of the room and knew the position Emma would be lying in. Hundreds of tributes came flooding in, including many from Emma's ex-boyfriend Riley. The candlelight vigil was held at Central High, and her fellow cheerleaders released balloons in her memory at that week's football game. When police started interviewing Emma Walker's friends and family, the same name kept coming up, over and over: Riley Gall. Some of Riley's friends became concerned for his well-being after Emma's passing. They told detectives a secret Riley had shared the day after he claimed he was kidnapped. Riley said he was now fearing for his life and had taken his grandfather's gun for protection. He then showed the gun to his friend Alex. Another friend, Noah, told detectives that Riley had asked him how to remove fingerprints from a gun, claiming he was asking for his roommate. Just a day before Emma was shot, Riley's grandfather reported this very gun as stolen. Riley asked Noah and Alex if they would help him get rid of the gun in the Tennessee River, as he feared it may implicate him in some way, even though he claimed he had absolutely nothing to do with Emma's death. Detectives brought Riley in for questioning. Police talked to him for hours that day. The more Riley talked, the more holes appeared in his story. He was elusive and detached, and the way he spoke about Emma did not match with his previous words. He referred to Emma as the girl and wouldn't use her name. Detectives said Riley was totally emotionless and disconnected, and his whole story seemed very rehearsed. "Oh, the girl, she texted me." "Which girl?" "The one that passed away." "Okay, which one?" "Emma." Despite maintaining he'd been in Maryville at the time Emma had been killed, cell phone analysis proved this to be a lie. His phone placed him on the freeway around midnight heading back to Knoxville from Maryville. It also put Riley in the vicinity of Emma's address at around 3:45 a.m., and she had been killed between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. Officers quizzed him on the gun and the information they had received from Noah and Alex, but Riley denied any of these conversations ever happened. Riley was the police's only suspect at this point, but they did not have enough to make an arrest. After he got out of the station, Riley sent Noah and Alex a text message and told them not to talk to the police again and instructed them to delete the messages from him. Little did Riley know, Alex and Noah were still talking with officers, and had been the second they found out Emma had died. The pair wanted to support the investigation and knew they could retrieve the murder weapon. Police were initially hesitant and warned them about the safety risks of getting involved, but the pair were both adamant and determined to help. "I wasn't fearful of my safety. I was just fearful that maybe justice couldn't have been done if we made the wrong move," Alex said. They hatched a plan with the police to catch Riley in his own lies. Noah and Alex spoke to Riley and agreed to help him dispose of his grandfather's gun in the Tennessee River. The plan was the police would wait nearby ready to arrest Riley as soon as he pulled the gun out. The boys would text the police a code word signaling them to move in. Officers gave Noah and Alex wires and body cameras, and an intricate undercover investigation began. After this was filmed, the three made their way to the river with the gun that Riley had been hiding at his stepfather's house. When they got there, Riley took out the gun ready to throw it in. But thanks to Noah and Alex, the police were waiting. 48 hours after Emma had been found, her killer was in handcuffs. Riley Gall was charged with the murder of Emma Walker. In the boot of Riley's car, police found black clothing and shoes. The only conclusion they could draw was that it had definitely been Riley trying to get into Emma's house a few days earlier. The trial of Riley Gall began a year and a half later, and he pled not guilty. He chose not to testify, and his legal team called no witnesses to the stand. His team's line of attack was not to argue that he didn't fire the bullets. but to argue that it was a total accident that the bullets had killed her. They claimed he was just trying to scare Emma by shooting near her, without realizing the bullets would go through the wall. He wanted her to confide in him and ultimately resume the relationship. His lawyer said Emma saw Riley as her hero, and this was all part of his clumsy plan to pretend to save her, but it went horribly wrong when he accidentally killed her in the process. The defense asked the jury if they were to find him guilty of anything, it was reckless homicide, which carried a substantially lesser sentence. But the prosecution said everything pointed to this being an intentional act, and it stemmed from his anger at her not wanting to get back together with him. The jury found William Riley Gall guilty of the first-degree murder of Emma Walker, as well as stalking, theft, reckless endangerment, and being in possession of a firearm during a dangerous felony. In the state of Tennessee, a first-degree murder conviction carries an automatic life sentence. Riley was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 51 years before he could even be considered for parole. He will be in his 70s. In May 2021, was announced that Riley Gall was seeking an acquittal based on insufficient evidence. If the acquittal was not granted, he was seeking a new trial. A motion hearing was set for June 4, 2021. However, his request was denied. Riley's attorney said he plans to appeal the ruling. Emma should have graduated in May 2018. Her family accepted her diploma for her, and her cap and gown were laid out on the chair she would have been sat in. Since her death, Emma's family and friends continue to work hard to keep her legacy alive. Her high school has a scholarship in her name. Jill said Emma's love of animals and her dreams of becoming a neonatal nurse were such big parts of her character. The Walker family has since had a dog park and a neonatal intensive care unit patient room at East Tennessee Children's Hospital named after her. Jill said that she hopes people remember Emma by channeling her energy and making sure they are always kind to others. The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Payne was born on April 19, 1986, in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She was their only child. Rebecca attended New Milford High School, graduating in 2004. During her high school years, she was an active athlete. After high school, Rebecca enrolled in Northeastern University in Boston, where she pursued a degree in athletic training. This 5-year program focused on the care and prevention of athletic injuries. In her 4th year, Rebecca held leadership positions, including a spot on the Dean's Council and serving as president of the athletic training club. She played a key role in organizing the university's vision for the Future Athletic Training Leadership Forum and was also involved with the Episcopal Lutheran Center. Rebecca was known for her friendly and approachable nature. She had a large circle of friends and was always willing to lend a helping hand. At 6:30 a.m. on May 20, 2008, Boston police received a call from the manager of the Parker Hill apartment complex. The man was in a panic. He told the police that he had seen a door ajar in a 3rd-floor apartment. A 22-year-old student, Rebecca Payne, lived in the apartment. When he knocked on the door and called her name, no one answered him, and he decided to go inside. There, he immediately saw dark red spots and stripes on the floor that led him to one of the rooms. He found Rebecca lying on the floor with no signs of life and her belongings scattered. When police arrived at the crime scene, they observed that the front door showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her attacker and may have let herself in willingly. Her 3rd-floor apartment had 2 bedrooms, and Rebecca's body was found face down on the floor in the bedroom. A trail of blood led from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting that the attack occurred in the living room, as there were traces of shell casings in that room. Forensic examinations showed that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. Blood stains in the apartment suggested that she had been conscious for some time, attempting to crawl to the bedroom before losing strength. Her valuables were still there. The state of disarray in her apartment was suspicious, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have deliberately created the mess to distract them. Additionally, the mess may have been caused by Rebecca's struggle for life. When they searched the apartment, police observed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Signs in the 2nd bedroom suggested that someone else had been living there. Identifying this person became a top priority for the police, as they were likely Rebecca's killer. After speaking with the apartment manager, police discovered that Rebecca lived with another student in her apartment, prompting police to begin searching for the student. At the same time, police interviewed residents of Parker Hill Apartments, some of whom reported hearing a woman scream in gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m. Unfortunately, no one reported the incident to the police. Rebecca Payne's tragic death left her parents reeling, not only from the loss of their daughter, but also from the appalling indifference of their neighbors. Despite hearing Rebecca's screams and gunshots, no one called for help. Rebecca's parents described her as a vibrant and compassionate young woman. She had a big heart and was known for putting others before herself, always looking to help those in need. In the aftermath of her death, police interviewed residents of the apartment complex where Rebecca lived. One man, who lived on the first floor, reported seeing a black SUV approach the building at night. However, due to the darkness, he was unable to see the car's license plates or identify who got out of the vehicle. The apartment building where the crime took place had both internal and external surveillance cameras. However, when police asked the building manager for the footage, they discovered that the cameras only allowed for real-time viewing. The outdated equipment required a video cassette to be inserted into a VCR and manually recorded, but no one had done so. Given this information, along with the fact that the manager was the one who found Rebecca's body, police began to suspect him of the crime. As a resident of the building, he had constant access to Rebecca's apartment and was aware that the surveillance cameras were not being monitored. The suspicion against the manager grew when a background check revealed his past run-ins with the law, specifically related to prohibited substances. Furthermore, an officer noticed dark red stains on the front door of the manager's apartment, which were swabbed and sent for examination. The manager was taken to the police station for questioning, where he denied any involvement in Rebecca's death, claiming he spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife. The police also spoke with his wife to verify his alibi. The woman's husband was initially a suspect, but his wife provided an alibi for his whereabouts during the night of the crime. Laboratory results showed that the dark red stains on his apartment door were just paint, leading the police to release him due to lack of evidence. Police investigating the case reviewed video and photo materials from the scene and focused on a public transportation card found near the crime scene. This card, used to pay for public transport in the Boston area, stores data on its usage, including the location and time of each use. Traffic police provided police with surveillance camera footage of the card being used. After reviewing the recordings, police determined that the card belonged to Rebecca and was used by her on the night she went missing. The footage showed Rebecca walking home, appearing calm and alone, with no signs of anyone following her. Unfortunately, this discovery did not lead to any new leads on the identity of the offender. The police obtained another video from a surveillance camera located outside the hospital building, near the Parker Hill apartments. This video captured a black SUV driving by at the time of Rebecca's attack. Although the video was poor quality, preventing the officers from seeing the license plates, it did appear to match the description given by the witness. And the detectives police it was a Ford vehicle. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed Rebecca's roommate at the police station. The roommate expressed shock at Rebecca's death and stated that she had been living with her parents while studying for an exam. This alibi was verified by her parents, clearing her of suspicion. However, the conversation was still fruitful as she provided potentially valuable information that could aid the investigation. According to Rebecca's roommate, Matt, Rebecca's boyfriend, had access to their apartment. To determine if Matt had a motive to harm Rebecca, police reached out to him by phone. Matt explained that he had moved to New York State to live with his parents around the time of the attack. He claimed to be depressed over Rebecca's death. Matt stated that he had been staying with his parents, and they confirmed his alibi. Police obtained a record of Matt's cell phone activity, revealing a conversation with Rebecca on the night of the attack, around midnight, a few hours before her death. However, the cell tower that received the signal from Matt's phone was located near his parents' house in New York State. To verify Matt's alibi, police conducted an experiment and concluded that it would have been impossible for him to drive from his parents' house to Boston in 3 or 4 hours, making it unlikely that he committed the crime. As a result, Matt was ruled out as a suspect. Rebecca's family and friends traveled to her home state of Connecticut to say goodbye, but the police investigation into Rebecca's death stalled. Despite their efforts, no new evidence was found, no witnesses came forward, and no DNA samples were collected. The case appeared to have reached a dead end. Years went by. In 2012, a breakthrough occurred. Anthony White was arrested by the Boston police for trafficking illegal substances and faced a lengthy prison sentence. In an attempt to reduce his sentence, Anthony offered to provide police with information about the night Rebecca Payne died. Recognizing this as a potential opportunity to solve the long-standing case, the police accepted Anthony's offer. Anthony declared that on May 20th, 2008, Anthony received a call from Cornell Smith, an acquaintance involved in the same illicit activities as him. Cornell requested a meeting and Anthony agreed. Cornell arrived with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who drove a black SUV. The three of them went to the Parker Hill apartments, where Michael parked in a spot with a clear view of the building. When Cornell spotted Rebecca in a third-floor window, he identified her. They waited until the lights in her apartment went out, assuming she had fallen asleep. Cornell then climbed from the first-floor balcony to the third-floor balcony, where he found the door to the apartment open. However, upon entering, he found Rebecca awake and lying on the couch in the living room. She began screaming when she saw him, and a brief struggle ensued. Cornell shot her 5 times before fleeing the apartment through the front door and escaping with Anthony and Michael in the SUV. Police questioned the credibility of Anthony's testimony, suspecting that he had fabricated the story based on news reports in order to get a reduced sentence. Police did not understand Cornell's motives, as Rebecca had no connection to him. However, according to Anthony, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. 2 sisters who lived on the first floor of Parker Hill Apartments looked very similar to Rebecca. The sisters were Cornell's rivals in the illegal drug trade. In retaliation, Cornell targeted Parker Hill Apartments, but he was not sure which floor or apartment the sisters lived in. When he saw Rebecca at the window, Cornell mistook her for one of his enemy sisters. Police looked into Cornell Smith's past and found that in February 2008, he was arrested for dealing illegal substances. Shortly before Rebecca's death, Cornell was released on bail. According to Anthony White's statement in 2012, Cornell wanted revenge against the sisters. However, when Anthony White came forward, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year sentence in prison for another conviction. With Anthony's new testimony, Cornell was then also charged in Rebecca's murder. Cornell denied his involvement, though. Before the case could go to trial, the key witness, Anthony White, died in prison. There was no longer any evidence to prove Cornell's involvement in the murder of Rebecca Payne. Since Anthony White was dead, the police needed new testimony from Michael Balba, who was with Anthony and Cornell on the night of the murder, in order to convict Cornell Smith. Michael was arrested and taken to the police station but without evidence. He denied involvement and requested a lawyer. As a result, hopes of solving the case seemed lost. In a final attempt to find the connection between Cornell and Rebecca's death, the police looked into Cornell's case files in connection with a separate case of drug trafficking. During the search, the police came across letters written by Cornell Smith to the judge. These letters revealed Cornell's arrogant attitude towards others, some of which seemed meaningless. However, one letter contained a crucial piece of evidence that linked Cornell to Rebecca's death. It remains unclear why these letters had not been scrutinized earlier, despite being addressed to the judge. The discovery of this key evidence ultimately helped police build a case against Cornell. In a letter written out of anger, Cornell referenced an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, leading to the unfortunate death of Rebecca Payne at the hands of Cornell. This letter confirmed that Cornell, was in Rebecca's apartment at the time of the incident. The trial took place in 2015. Jeffrey Karp, a defense attorney with more than 20 years of experience, was the first attorney to represent Cornell. However, Jeffrey withdrew from the case after an incident. Cornell suddenly stood up and struck Jeffrey Karp in the head with his handcuffed hand, causing chaos in the Suffolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. Jeffrey Karp then opted not to prosecute, instead allowing the judge to appoint a new attorney for Cornell. Cornell Smith took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to taking the life of Rebecca Payne as part of the deal. He received a prison sentence of 18 to 20 years from the judge. To honor Rebecca's memory, her hometown renamed the local tennis court after her. A garden and a National Athletic Trainers Association scholarship fund have also been established in her name. According to Rebecca's father, Nicholas Payne, these tributes were created with one main goal in mind. Case of Anupama Gulati. Some murder cases are so brutal and disturbing that they defy belief. Today, we're looking at a case from India that isn't even documented on Wikipedia. Yet what truly shocked people wasn't just the killing itself, but the horrifying way the body was disposed of afterward. The details are enough to send chills down your spine. This incident is regarded as one of the most gruesome crimes to have occurred in the scenic city of Dehradun, Uttarakhand. So what exactly happened in the Anupama Gulati deep freezer case? Watch till the end to uncover the full story. On October 15, 2010, Anupama Gulati, who lived in Dehradun, Uttarakhand, resided with her husband and their 2 children. Around that time, her phone began experiencing unusual disruptions. Her parents and brother would normally speak to her 2 or 3 times a week, so whenever her phone was switched off for extended periods, it caused them serious concern. Worried about her sudden unavailability, Anupama's brother, S.K. Chaturvedi, began contacting her husband, Rajesh Gulati, to ask about her. Each time he called, Rajesh offered the same explanation. Anupama was either too busy or had stepped out for some work. This situation went on for nearly 2 weeks. During that period, Anupama stayed in regular contact with her brother through email, a detail SK found somewhat unusual. Still, the Gulati family felt reassured, as her messages consistently stated that she was doing well and was happy with her husband and their 2 children. This pattern continued for about 2 months. However, when repeated attempts to reach her by phone failed, her parents asked SK Chaturvedi to travel to Dehradun and meet Anupama in person. When Chaturvedi reached Rajesh's house on December 12, 2010, Rajesh reacted with visible anger at the sight of him. He stepped outside and locked the door behind him. Rajesh then told Chaturvedi that Anupama was out somewhere and unavailable to meet. Suspicious of his behavior, Chaturvedi attempted to force his way into the house, which sparked a heated confrontation between the 2 men. Despite the altercation, Rajesh refused to let him enter. Moreover, when Chaturvedi repeatedly questioned him about his sister's whereabouts, Rajesh failed to provide any clear or convincing explanation. After this, Anupama's brother went to a nearby police station and filed a missing person report for his sister, Anupama Gulati. He also informed the authorities that he had attempted to enter her house, but his brother-in-law had refused to let him inside. Finding the circumstances suspicious, a police team accompanied Chaturvedi to Rajesh Gulati's residence. When Rajesh saw the police arrive with him, he appeared visibly unsettled. The officers began asking routine questions about Anupama's whereabouts, but Rajesh avoided giving clear answers and instead attempted to mislead them. However, the police quickly saw through Rajesh's attempts to mislead them and decided to conduct a thorough search of the house. During the inspection, one officer noticed a locked room. When it was opened, nothing appeared unusual at first glance, except for a large standing freezer inside. Since such industrial freezers are usually found in big stores or restaurants, the officers found it highly suspicious. They questioned why Rajesh would need such a massive appliance for a small family household. Deciding to examine it further, the police opened the freezer. Inside, they discovered numerous small black packets. When one of the officers opened a packet, it contained pieces of human flesh. As they continued checking the others, the horror deepened. One of the packets held a human skull, leaving everyone at the scene stunned. After the gruesome discovery, Rajesh Gulati broke down in tears and confessed to the police that the remains found inside the freezer were parts of Anupama's body. Following his statement, the police immediately placed him under arrest. After completing the required formalities, Rajesh was produced before the local court, where officers secured a 5-day police remand for further investigation. According to Rajesh's statement, he met Anupama while studying at Delhi University, where he completed his master's degree in science before going on to become a software engineer. During their university years, the 2 grew very close, and their friendship gradually developed into a serious relationship. Initially, they kept their relationship hidden from their families. However, they eventually decided to marry, and both families approved of their union. In 1999, Rajesh and Anupama were married in a grand ceremony. After his marriage, Rajesh's career took off quickly, and he landed a job at a big company in the United States. Rajesh and Anupama moved to the US, where they were financially stable and even bought a house. However, Anupama wanted to work too, but Rajesh opposed it due to the visa requirements. This led to arguments between the couple, and Rajesh discovered that Anupama was developing a close friendship with his close friend. This further intensified the tensions in their marriage. In 2006, Anupama gave birth to twin children, which brought some harmony to the household. However, in 2007 to 2008, during the recession in America, Rajesh lost his job. He managed to sustain his family with his savings for a while, but eventually he had to sell his house and return to India with his family. The ongoing arguments between Rajesh and Anupama escalated into a physical altercation, prompting them to take the matter to the family court. The court subsequently ordered Rajesh to provide Anupama with a monthly maintenance to cover her expenses. Rajesh secured a job in a company located in Kolkata, which was distant from his hometown. During this time, Rajesh befriended a married woman in Kolkata, and their bond grew increasingly close. Eventually, they got married in a temple without informing anyone. After his second marriage, Rajesh started living a normal life. He interacted with Anupama in a regular way, went to work every day, and did not let anyone suspect anything about his second marriage. However, Anupama observed Rajesh's behavior and understood that he also had a girlfriend in Kolkata. Despite this, Rajesh and Anupama had numerous arguments about this issue, and Anupama even started discussing divorce. However, Rajesh managed to convince Anupama, and their divorce did not occur. On the other hand, Rajesh was no longer paying Anupama the 20,000 rupees that the court had ordered him to pay due to all these disputes. On October 17, 2010, there was a significant altercation between the two individuals. During this incident, Rajesh became angry over something and forcefully pushed his wife. As a result, Anupama's head struck the corner of the bed, causing her to bleed from the head. Immediately after this, Rajesh was terrified for a few seconds, but then he himself lifted a pillow from the bed and used it to suffocate Anupama. Anupama Gulati had already died, and now Rajesh was trying to find a way to dispose of his wife's body. Rajesh happened to be at home on the 17th, and both his children were at school, so he thought he needed to find a place to hide Anupama's body before the children came back from school. Rajesh took Anupama to the second bathroom in the house and locked it. He then contemplated how to dispose of Anupama's body without arousing suspicion. However, shortly after, his children returned home from school, and when they asked about their mother, Rajesh told them that she had to suddenly go to Delhi. The following day, Rajesh went to the market and purchased a deep freezer, an electric chainsaw, a stone cutter machine, and small black envelopes. He hid these items in another room. The next day, when the children went back to school, Rajesh started cutting his wife's body into small pieces using the electric chainsaw, after closing all the doors and windows of the house. According to the statement given to the police, Rajesh cut his wife's body into a total of 72 pieces and then filled those pieces into black envelopes. After that, he carefully placed each envelope in the deep freezer to prevent the smell of the corpse from spreading. It took Rajesh quite a few days to kill Anupama Gulati, cut her body, and keep it in the freezer. During this time, whenever Anupama's parents or brother called, Rajesh made excuses to avoid them. He also came up with excuses for their neighbors who inquired about Anupama, and he had already convinced both children that their mother had gone to Delhi. In addition, Rajesh had access to Anupama's email, which is why he continued to communicate with Anupama's brother to ensure that those people did not suspect that Anupama was no longer in this world. However, after committing the murder, Rajesh went to the famous tourist destination of Mussoorie in Uttarakhand with his children for a weekend getaway. During this trip, Rajesh would take 2 or 3 envelopes from the fridge and discard them in the gorge or forests along the way. After this revelation, everyone was shocked, and the police also went to the place where Rajesh claimed to have disposed of the pieces of Anupama's body. After quite a bit of investigation, the police found some black envelopes in the surrounding forests and a gorge. Now, after collecting this evidence, Rajesh Gulati was sent back to jail. On the other hand, his twin children were sent to Delhi with Anupama's brother, S.K. Chaturvedi. The court officially granted custody of the children to Chaturvedi on March 7, 2011. However, Rajesh Gulati's father, Satyapal Gulati, filed an appeal against this court decision. But on November 3, 2012, the court dismissed Satyapal Gulati's appeal and awarded custody of the children to Chaturvedi. Additionally, based on the police's evidence, it was proven that Rajesh Gulati had brutally murdered his wife and cut her body into 72 pieces. After a lengthy trial lasting 7 years, on September 1, 2017, Rajesh Gulati was sentenced to life imprisonment and a fine of 1.5 million rupees for the murder. The court announced that out of the 1.5 million rupees to be paid by Rajesh Gulati as a penalty, 70,000 rupees would be deposited in the state treasury, while the remaining amount would be deposited in the names of both children. They will have the right to that money only after they reach adulthood. In 2018, Rajesh Gulati appealed the decision made by the lower court in the higher court. However, no decision has been made on this appeal yet, which is why Rajesh Gulati has been in jail for several years. During the police interrogation, Rajesh Gulati revealed that he has a daughter from his second marriage in Kolkata. This revelation sheds light on why Rajesh had an altercation with his wife Anupama and stopped providing her financial support. This was a highly violent case that made him famous in India, as well as the details surrounding the incident, emphasizing her need for answers regarding who, what, when, and where. The Pryor family, friends, and the community as a whole had been waiting for answers for about a half a century, hoping for justice and closure in Sharon Pryor's case. While the recent breakthrough brings a glimmer of hope, it is a reminder of the enduring pain and the importance of finding the truth for the sake of Sharon's memory and those who loved her. As we reflect on the recent breakthrough and the impact it had on her friends and family, it's clear that this case has left an indelible mark on the community. The case of Rebecca Bleefnick. Rebecca and Tim, who met at Quincy University, were the epitome of a perfect couple. Rebecca was a biology major and a tennis player, while Tim was a star football player. 2 years after graduating, the practical couple decided to tie the knot. Instead of splurging on an engagement ring and a lavish honeymoon, they chose to save their money. Although Rebecca had a genuine interest in medicine and had dreamed of becoming a doctor, she decided to pursue motherhood instead. Her dream came true when she and Tim had 3 sons. Tim was known for his charisma and ability to entertain. In 2008, he auditioned for American Gladiators, making it to the final round. Years later, in 2019, he received an invitation from the producers of Family Feud to participate in the show with his family. Rebecca's nursing school commitments prevented her from joining Tim on the TV show Family Feud. Undeterred, Tim assembled a team of family members, including his parents and brothers. The show's format features 2 teams competing to guess the most popular responses to survey questions from 100 people. Despite being unprepared, Tim's team performed well, earning points and ranking second on the scoreboard. They went on to participate in 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000, which was divided equally among the family members. However, Tim did not share any of the winnings with his wife, Rebecca. This decision highlights the strain on Tim and Rebecca's marriage, which began when Rebecca pursued a nursing career against Tim's wishes. Tim had expressed concerns about Rebecca's well-being and ability to manage stress, but Rebecca's friends believed Tim was opposed to her independence and autonomy. Rebecca's friends noticed that she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage over time. At first, her marriage to Tim was relatively happy for about 5 years. But then Tim started to become more controlling and manipulative. Despite Rebecca's hard work in her nursing studies and job, Tim didn't pull his weight at home, leaving Rebecca to handle most of the responsibilities. Rebecca realized that their marriage was struggling and wanted to fix it, so she suggested that they go to marriage counseling together. She believed that counseling could help them find solutions and improve their relationship. However, Tim refused to go despite Rebecca's efforts to save their marriage. In January 2021, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce, which caught Rebecca off guard. She had been committed to working through their issues, but Tim had already made up his mind. He moved out of their family home and into a new house across town, leaving Rebecca to pick up the pieces. Tim and Rebecca's divorce was extremely contentious. They were unable to agree on anything, and their communication broke down completely. The couple disputed several issues, including who would get custody of the children, how they would divide their property, and how much alimony one would pay the other. Things escalated to the point where Tim felt threatened and applied for a court order to protect himself from Rebecca, alleging that she was stalking and harassing him. Rebecca had a different view of the situation, accusing Tim of harassment. She shared her concerns with friends through text messages describing incidents where Tim yelled at her, pushed her in front of their sons, and threw things. Rebecca feared Tim might do something drastic to take her children away, which alarmed her sister, who knew Rebecca's fears were valid and that she needed help to protect herself. Rebecca then filed for an order of protection against him, claiming he entered her home without permission and lied about their interactions. However, the judge denied both Rebecca and Tim's requests, instead ordering them to stay away from each other's homes, except during child custody exchanges. In February 2023, Tim told the police he wouldn't return a gun, calling Rebecca a derogatory name. At the time, Rebecca and Tim's 3 sons, aged 12, 10, and 5, was staying with Tim at his home, just a mile from Rebecca's residence. Their divorce was set to be finalized in just 1 week. Tim contacted Rebecca's father the next day, worried because he couldn't reach Rebecca, and she had failed to pick up the boys from school as planned. Given Rebecca's dedication as a mother, her father suspected something was seriously wrong. Concerned for Rebecca's safety, her father rushed to her house. When he arrived, he entered the house calling out to Rebecca, but received no response. He went upstairs to her bedroom, where he found a disturbing scene. Rebecca lay on her back, covered in blood and gunshot wounds. After Rebecca's father discovered her body in the bathroom, detectives and forensic experts arrived at the house. They began by carefully examining the outside of the property, searching for clues. Their investigation revealed that the suspect had probably entered the house by forcing open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. The discovery led investigators to believe that the suspect used a patio chair to gain access to the house and climb up to the roof. By retracing the suspect's likely path, they went to Rebecca's bedroom, where they found the door had been violently kicked in or broken. The state of the door suggested to investigators that the suspect had forcibly entered the room, probably in search of Rebecca. Evidence indicated that Rebecca had tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect had pursued her and caught up. Ultimately, the suspect shot Rebecca inside the bathroom. During their search of the bathroom, where Rebecca's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. Upon examining Rebecca's phone, investigators found a 911 call dialed at 1:11 a.m. This led them to form a theory about the events of that night. They believed that as the suspect chased Rebecca through the house, she tried to call for help, but accidentally dialed a wrong number before she could try calling 911 again. The misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. suggested to investigators that the suspect had knocked the phone out of Rebecca's hand. They believed Rebecca was likely killed around this time. However, when police questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them remembered hearing any noise around 1:11 a.m., which raised suspicions among the investigators. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not a botched burglary, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind significant evidence. One notable discovery was a partial shoe print found near the point where the suspect entered the house. The shoe print discovered at the crime scene could be crucial in identifying the type of shoe worn by the suspect, including its make and model, as well as providing details about the size and shape of their feet. The presence of 8 9mm shell casings and small pieces of shredded plastic near Rebecca's body also provide significant leads for the investigators. Despite collecting these key pieces of evidence, the investigators were unsure how to interpret their findings. To gain more insight, they decided to send the evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. Specifically, they wanted to determine if any of Rebecca's personal belongings matched the evidence found at the crime scene. The investigation began when Rebecca's father found her lifeless body in the bathroom of her home. Upon arriving at the scene, investigators carefully examined the exterior of the house, leading them to identify how the perpetrator gained entry by prying open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. Here's what likely happened. The suspect used a patio chair to climb up to the roof and entered the house. The investigators retraced the suspect's steps and found that the bedroom door had been violently kicked in or broken, suggesting the suspect had forced their way in, probably looking for Rebecca. It seems Rebecca tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect caught up with her. Unfortunately, the suspect shot and killed Rebecca in the bathroom. The investigators found Rebecca's phone near her body and examined it. They discovered that she had dialed 911, but mistakenly entered an extra digit, 91126, at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped the investigators piece together the events. They believe Rebecca was desperately trying to call for help as the suspect chased her through the house, but she accidentally dialed the wrong number. Before she could try calling 911 again, the suspect likely knocked the phone out of her hand. The timing of the misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. led investigators to believe that Rebecca's murder likely occurred around that time. However, when they questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them reported hearing any suspicious noises, which was surprising given the fact that she had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not the result of a burglary gone wrong, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind a significant amount of evidence. One crucial discovery was a partial shoe print near the point of entry, which could help identify the brand and model of the shoe, as well as the size and shape of the suspect's foot. The crime scene also yielded 8 9mm shell casings, and small pieces of shredded plastic were found scattered near Rebecca's body. After gathering all the evidence, the investigators were unsure what to make of their findings, so they decided to send the said evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. The detectives wanted to determine if any of the evidence found at the crime scene matched Rebecca's belongings. A neighbor had installed a security camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year earlier. The camera was directed towards the neighbor's driveway, which shared a boundary with Rebecca's home, and was set to turn on and alert the neighbor whenever it detected movement. Although the camera didn't capture anything significant on the night of Rebecca's death, it did record something unusual the previous day at 1:05 a.m. The footage showed a person walking down the driveway towards the back of Rebecca's house, a potentially crucial discovery in the case. About 48 minutes after the initial sighting, the same individual was seen walking in the opposite direction. Interestingly, Rebecca's neighbor had captured a similar incident on their camera about a week prior, on February 14th. After reviewing their security footage, Rebecca's neighbors noticed a suspicious dark-clad figure lurking around her house on Valentine's Day, prompting them to alert her immediately. Upon learning about the mysterious figure, Rebecca became increasingly paranoid. Although she claimed not to have seen anyone on her property, she had heard unsettling voices in her backyard the previous night, which frightened her. Based on the security camera footage, the police expanded their search to neighboring houses to gather more evidence of the dark-clad individual. Their search led them to a house near the Quinney bus barn, where they found footage of a person riding a bike, dressed in dark clothing, heading towards Rebecca's house. These videos confirmed the description of the mysterious person seen in the original driveway footage, providing a clear consistency in the suspect's appearance. After analyzing the recorded times of the videos, detectives suspected that the person on the bike was the same individual seen in Rebecca's driveway footage. Although Rebecca's neighbor's security camera didn't capture footage of the mysterious person on the night of her murder, officers found footage of someone on a bike riding towards Rebecca's house just before and after the incident. This person matched the description of the individual seen lurking in Rebecca's driveway in the days leading up to her murder. While the video evidence was helpful in the investigation, its poor quality limited the information it provided. The detectives couldn't identify the person in the video due to the grainy image, making it difficult to determine their gender. However, they did notice one distinctive feature. The bike had no reflectors on its wheels. When Rebecca's sister heard that she was murdered, only one person came to mind as a suspect: Rebecca's estranged husband, Tim. Rebecca's sister, who had a first-hand account of the contentious divorce between Rebecca and Tim, shared this information with the detectives working on her sister's case. The detectives suspected Tim of murdering Rebecca, especially since her murder happened just a week before their divorce was due to be finalized. During the investigation, they made a crucial discovery. A bike with no reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on security footage, was found just a block from Tim's house. This discovery increased the suspicion surrounding Tim, leading the detectives to obtain a search warrant for his home. When the police executed the warrant, Tim cooperated fully, standing outside his home with the officers as they searched his belongings. On March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after Rebecca's murder, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder. When his mugshot was released, Rebecca's family and friends were shocked by his appearance, which was very different from the clean-cut man they had known. Tim's friends and family were shocked by his disheveled appearance, which they attributed to the emotional toll of his recent divorce. His once neat and tidy hair was now unkempt, and his clothes were messy. They speculated that the divorce had affected not only his physical appearance, but also his mental well-being. However, Tim had a surprising explanation for his changed look. He revealed that he was growing his hair out to support a charity campaign for cancer research. Despite this, a viral video clip showed Tim's appearance on Family Feud, where he made a bizarre statement about regretting his marriage, which took on a disturbing tone after he was arrested for murdering his wife. Many people believed that Tim's comment on Family Feud was a strange and unsettling prediction of what would eventually happen. They thought it showed that he had hidden feelings about his wife and was a sign that something bad was happening in their relationship. When the police looked into Tim's phone, they found that he had made a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During their investigation, they discovered that Tim had been searching for a specific type of bicycle on Facebook, a blue Schwinn bike with no reflectors on the wheels. This was an important discovery because it matched the description of a bike that was found abandoned just 1 block away from Tim's house. Despite having strong evidence against Tim, the detectives faced a significant obstacle when they arrested him. Tim was held in jail without the possibility of bail, but he requested a quick trial, which is his right under the law. Prosecutors were required to bring the matter to trial within 90 days of Tim's arrest. The prosecution faced a significant challenge in convincing a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Tim murdered Rebecca due to the absence of a confession or DNA evidence. Juries typically look for these 2 key elements in criminal cases. To prove Tim's guilt in the murder of his wife Rebecca, the prosecution faced a significant challenge. Exactly 3 months after Rebecca's tragic murder in her home, Tim's trial began on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented several key pieces of evidence found at the crime scene. One notable piece of evidence was the shredded plastic fragments discovered around Rebecca's body. The prosecution argued that these fragments came from an owl's grocery bag. Further investigation revealed that similar bags were found in Tim's house. The prosecution alleged that Tim used these bags as a makeshift silencer when he shot his estranged wife multiple times. They claimed that the bags were used to muffle the sound of the gunfire, preventing it from being heard by others. The prosecution also presented DNA evidence, suggesting that Tim left behind DNA while using the Aldi bags. An expert testified that it was highly likely Tim contributed to the DNA found, and that his DNA could not be ruled out as a match for the DNA found under Rebecca's fingernails. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that a crowbar found in Tim's basement might have been used to force open the window at the victim's house on the night of the murder. Although an expert testified that there were microscopic similarities between the crowbar and the window's prime arc, she couldn't conclusively say that the crowbar was involved. To build a stronger case, the prosecution presented records of several searches made on Tim's phone, including how to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, how to clean gunpowder off your hands, and average police response time in Quinney. The prosecution's expert witness testified that she compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to those found at Tim's house during the investigation. Her analysis revealed that 27 of the casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used to kill Rebecca. When investigators searched Tim's house, they didn't find Rebecca's 9mm gun, which he had refused to return to her. Tim claimed he hadn't seen the gun. Today's case takes us to Setagaya, Tokyo. Setagaya is a serene suburban-style residential community. It is located not far from central Tokyo. It is made up of cultural amenities like art museums, libraries, and many parks. Setagaya is also renowned for having a large number of upscale residential areas. The city is popular with young people and filled with trendy coffee shops, adorable bookstores, and student pubs. The Miyazawa family was a joyful family of 4 who resided in Setagaya. They were a quiet, typical suburban family. In December of 2000, the Miyazawa family had planned to spend New Year's Eve at home, enjoying a quiet evening, cooking a special meal and anticipating the coming year. Mikio, the father and the head of the family, was a 44-year-old businessman who worked in corporate identity development for Interbrand, a London-based international media and marketing company with branches in 19 cities around the world. Since it was a remote job, Mikio worked from home and had a private study on the ground floor, which he used as his office. Yasuko, his wife, was 41 years old and was a popular teacher who enjoyed her job and was well respected by her students, their parents, and her co-workers. Mikio and Yasuko had 2 children named Nina and Rei. Nina was their 8-year-old daughter and Rei, their son, who had speech defect, was just 6 years old at the time of their murder. The Miyazawa family occupied a duplex, a sizable house that had been divided in 2. The other half of the house at the time was being resided by Yasuko's mother, Ashawi Jino. The duplex was close to Sashigaya Park, which has walking paths, sports fields, a children's playground. After settling into their house in 1990. The Miyazawa family fell in love with the lifestyle it provided. However, a few years later, the government decided to turn the area into a park for recreation and purchased all the nearby homes to make room for the project. The government already bought around 200 homes, but the Miyazawa family was one of just 3 households that were still in the area in December 2000. At the time, the area looks deserted, and according to reports, the Miyazawa family planned to move out the following year, in 2001. Even though there weren't many people living in the area anymore, the skate park at Sashigaya Park next to their house grew increasingly busy. Even outside their home, Mikio had to reprimand some rowdy teenagers for disturbing them. Additionally, he confronted Bazooka biker gang members for being too loud. He was obviously very stressed due to the inrush of people. At the time of the murder, the older sister of Yasuko was in Japan with her husband, eager to spend the new year with her family, even though she worked and resided in the UK. They stayed with their mother next door to Yasuko and her family throughout the visit. Around 10 a.m. on the December 31st, 2000, Yasuko's mother, Asahi, attempted to call the Miyazawa residence, but the call was unsuccessful. Despite the fact that they shared a door, they respected each other's privacy and never paid a surprise visit. Asahi made several calls in an attempt to get through to her daughter and her family, but nobody would pick up. According to her, they very rarely ignored calls. She then made the decision to go around and check on them. She noticed their car in the driveway, but when she knocked, no one answered the door. She then attempted to enter the house, but the door was locked. She returned to her residence to get her own key, before returning to let herself in. What she discovered was a gruesome scene. The entire family had been brutally murdered in a horrific way. Firstly, she discovered the body of her son-in-law, Mikio, on the floor. He appeared to have fallen down the stairs, based on the position of his body and the multiple stab wounds on his neck. The terrified grandmother hurried upstairs to find her daughter and grandchildren. At the top of the stairs, she discovered Yasuko and Nina dead, lying in their own pool of blood. Both had been repeatedly and savagely stabbed. Yasuko's mother ran to her grandson's room in the hopes of finding him alive. But he was also dead, strangled in his bed. It was truly a traumatizing scene to witness. Asahi was terrified and confused at the same time. She frantically dialed the police's number, pleading with them to arrive as soon as possible. The house was in a mess when the police arrived at the crime scene. There were numerous documents lying around, and it appeared that someone had slept on the couch in the living room. A chest of drawers with each drawer open and papers sticking out of them was located behind Mikio's body. Investigators discovered a missing drawer in the bathroom with all of its contents in the bathtub. They also found garbage and bloodied bandages in the bathtub, which was an odd collection of items to throw in a tub. Police discovered 150,000 yen in cash as well as foreign currency worth 5,000 yen in Mikio's study. The only thing missing was Mikio's old jacket. It's possible that the murderer fled the scene wearing Mikio's jacket because he left behind his bloody clothes. Nothing else was missing, so robbery could not have been the reason for the killings since nothing else was missing. Police discovered a screen that had been cut and taken out of a window in the second-floor bathroom while searching through the entire duplex. The bathroom was located towards the back of the house and could be reached from the fence between the property and the park. In light of the fact that all other doors and windows were locked and closed, this appeared to be the most likely point of entry. Footprints on the wall below the window were visible from the outside as well. As you walk from the bathroom, the kid's bedroom was the first room on the right. According to the police, Ray was sleeping in the room on the bunk bed he shared with his sister when the killer entered and strangled the child to death. Most likely noticing movement upstairs, Mikio went to see if his son was all right. He was pushed down the stairs after being stabbed with a sashimi knife at the top of the stairs. The next victim was young Nina. The murderer discovered her in bed with her mother on the third floor, which could only be accessed by a drop ladder. He attacked her but stopped midway through the attack when he realized that the sashimi knife's tip had come off while he was attacking Mikio. Yasuko and Nina likely believed the attacker had left at this point, so they descended the ladder to the spot where Mikio was attacked. Yasuko did her best to save her daughter by going to get the first aid kit. However, the murderer was not finished. He returned with one of their kitchen knives and discovered them at the top of the stairs, where he killed both mother and daughter. Yasuko and Nina sustained the most brutal assaults out of the 4 murders. According to forensics, after they both were already dead, their attacker kept stabbing them repeatedly. Yasuko was said to have made a valiant effort to fight off the attacker, desperately trying to protect her daughter from him, as evident by the wounds on her body. However, the killer was unfazed and saw that the job was completed. The perpetrator cut his hand during the attack and bandaged it with supplies from the family's first aid kit. In order to stop the bleeding, he had also used sanitary pads he discovered in the restroom. After he was done with his heinous crime, the killer comfortably remained in the house, which had been a happy family home just hours earlier. He drank some barley tea and ate some melon and ice cream from their refrigerator. He slept on their couch, used their toilet without flushing, and unplugged their phone. He also attempted to use Mikio's credit card to purchase theater tickets at 1:18 a.m. after logging onto the family computer. However, he did not finish the transaction because he lacked all the necessary security details. He went on to set up browser bookmarks for the websites of the business Mikio worked for and the institution Yasuko worked for as well. The police discovered activity on the computer at 10 a.m. on the morning of December 31st, though it wasn't clear if the killer stayed online all night or if he logged in again the following morning. Police believed they could not rule out the possibility that Ashi accidentally touched the computer when she entered the house at 10:55 a.m. Chances are, if it wasn't her, then the murderer had already left before she arrived. The murder weapon, the sashimi knife, and the kitchen knife were both left on the kitchen table before the killer left. At the crime scene, there was a ton of forensic evidence. Nina's blood and the murderer's blood were found on the first aid kit. Additionally, the killer had failed to flush the toilet and left feces floating in it. He left his hit bag behind. It contained sand that could be traced to the United States. The detectives were able to follow the sand traces all the way to a particular spot. It landed them at the vicinity of Nevada's Edwards Air Force Base. Also, a roll of tape, which skateboarders frequently used to fix their boards, was found in the hip bag. Lastly, the hip bag contained a folded iron handkerchief with traces of French cologne that was popular among skaters then. There were numerous footprints all over the house, which offered intriguing hints. The perpetrator was wearing Slazenger shoes, but they were never sold in Japan in the exact size he was wearing. That size was in fact only available in South Korea. He had gloves, but he didn't use them because his prints were all over the place. Actually, forensic experts were able to extract a full set of fingerprints from material evidence discovered around the house. He also abandoned his blood-stained clothing. His clothes, however, were left at the scene neatly folded, in contrast to the way he left the drawers, documents, and ice cream cups. Unlike the soft water in Japan, the clothes had been washed in hard water with a higher mineral content. The water used was typical in Korea, though. The purchase of the sweater the killer wore and the knife he used was tracked by the police to the Kanagawa prefecture. Only 130 of the identical sweaters were ever sold, but only 12 of the owners could be located by police. So, if the sweater was bought in Japan but washed in Korea, could it be that the murderer resided in Japan but visited Korea before the killings? Maybe the sweater hadn't been washed in Japan since he bought it because it was made in Korea? The blood found at the scene of the crime was used to create a genetic profile, which revealed that the unidentified suspect was mixed race. The killer's father was East Asian, while his mother was of Southern European ancestry. DNA revealed a unique gene sequence that can only be found in people of Chinese, Korean, or Japanese ancestry. 1 in 5 men of Korean descent, 1 in 10 Chinese men, and 1 in 13 Japanese men fit this type of profile. Detectives believed the theory that the murderer was a foreigner. Accepting that such a monster was not from your country was simpler. Despite sending investigators to Korea to work with local law enforcement on the case, the Korean government was unable to assist in identifying the murderer. In recent years, the idea that the murderer was Korean has gained popularity. The likelihood that the murderer was Japanese was only 1 in 13. He might also have been a Korean Japanese of the first or second generation. The Korean expat community and the diplomatic community were among the areas of Japan where investigators searched for a person of mixed race. Perhaps the maternal European connection could have offered some information. However, neither the killer's DNA nor fingerprints could be found on anyone. Police questioned whether the murderer might have been a member of the military due to the source of the sand in the hip bag. Could he have been a second-generation Korean Japanese or Chinese-American citizen? Given that U.S. forces have been stationed in Japan since the end of World War II, despite the abundance of evidence, police were unable to identify the murderer. In an effort to identify anyone who might have had a reason to kill the Miyazawa family, they went back to the investigative board and looked at their connections and relatives. However, the victims' loved ones and friends had no idea who would want to murder them. They were well liked by the locals and had no known enemies. At the nearby skate park, Mikio warned skaters for being too loud, and that was it. It undoubtedly wasn't a good enough excuse to brutally murder a man and his family. According to forensic evidence found in the killer's faces that were left in the toilet, he had consumed sesame seeds and string beans, a dish that is very popular in Japan and is typically made at home. This must have been consumed by the murderer prior to the killings because it was not consumed at the Miyazawa residence. Police took into account the possibility that the killer still resided with his mother. A timeline of the incidents leading up to the terrible night was created by the investigators. There were numerous reports of animals being killed and dismembered in the park next to the family's residence, just 6 months prior to the murders. In August 2000, locals discovered that a cat had been skinned. Police were able to identify the perpetrator of the animal abuse later on in the investigation. He worked as a bank clerk and his actions had nothing to do with the murders of the Miyazawa family. Few days before the murders, Yasuko had informed her father-in-law on December 25th that a strange car occasionally parked in front of their home. A car had no business being there because the park's entrance was on the other side of the fence. They also discovered a strange man wandering around the house 2 days later. Local residents claimed to have seen a strange man on December 29th wandering through the neighborhood shops. He was dressed in skater gear and was in his late 30s or early 40s. They noticed that he was wearing the same clothes that were discovered at the crime scene. This seemed strange, especially given the season. He did not appear to be dressed warmly enough. According to one of the shop owners, the man purchased a sashimi knife, which was the only knife sold that day. Strangely, the forensics identified the knife as the same knife the killer had used. A neighbor of the Miyazawa family saw the same man walking around their house again the following day. Everyone had left the house to go shopping, so nobody was home. The witness described the unknown person in detail, telling police that he was wearing a gray wool hat with a black stripe. He was wearing gloves, a long-sleeve t-shirt, a hip bag, a colorful scarf, a black Uniqlo jacket, and white Slazenger shoes. After the killings, the majority of these items were discovered in the Miyazawa residence. On the evening of December 30th, Yasuko called her mother at 7 o'clock to let her know that they had just returned home. Her mother then asked if the children were interested in coming over to watch television. Nina, the older child, loved the idea while Riai preferred to stay at home. Nina spent a few hours with her grandmother next door before leaving between 9 and 9:30 p.m. to go to bed. The family computer was used for the last known activity in the Miyazawa residence at 10:38 p.m. Mikio opened a work email that was password protected. He is the only person who is likely to have known the password to open the email. A neighbor overheard a fight inside the Miyazawa's house at 11 o'clock while he was taking a stroll in the park. It sounded more like a husband and wife arguing than like a physical altercation. A loud thud was heard in the other half of the building next door. Around 11:30 p.m. by Asahi and Yasuko's sister, they were both watching television while still awake. Another witness observed a man leaving the house quickly around the same time. When Asahi arrived after 10 a.m. the following morning, she reported to the police that the light on the ground floor and in the entrance hallway was on. However, the light, according to a paperboy who delivered papers at the Miyazawa's doorstep on the morning of 31st, was not on. A taxi driver came forward after the murder and admitted to the police that he had picked up 3 middle-aged men close to the Miyazawa family home. According to him, the silence in the car was unsettling, almost too quiet. The driver said there was blood on the back seat when they exited and one of the men was hurt. Another tip came in again soon after. A young man visited a clinic on December 31st, about 70 miles north of the Miyazawa family home. His hand had been cut so deeply that his bone was exposed. Medical personnel were treating the wound. The man was described by staff as being very composed and not showing much concern for his injury. Given how serious the wound was, they thought his behavior was odd. The man was described as being in his 30s, wearing a black down jacket and jeans. He left the center without giving any information, not even a name or an address. Only later in the investigation was this tip determined to be significant. Police initially believed that the murderer had left the scene in the middle of the night, but after processing the crime scene and receiving the results of the blood tests, they came to the conclusion that he had actually left in the morning, just before Asahi arrived. Numerous months had passed by the time the data from the medical center was analyzed and police were still without any leads on the man. In 2018, Tokyo police made information about their suspect public in the hopes that someone would be able to assist in prosecuting him. The information determined that the perpetrator was a young man between the ages of 15 and 20, based on all the evidence discovered at the crime scene. He stands at 170 centimeters tall, and they were able to determine that he is right-handed by looking at the victim's knife wounds. He might have been a drifter or an undocumented immigrant, which would account for why he was impossible to find. The police speculated that the murderer might have been the son of a diplomat, a soldier, or the son of a wealthy local family who may have been one of the skaters who fought with Mikio in the months before the killings because it was determined that he was younger than 30 to 40 years old. 250,000 police officers worked on the case in the months following the murders. In Japan, violent home invasions are extremely uncommon, so authorities were determined to apprehend the murderer. Police were never able to identify the murderer, despite all the available evidence. 40 officers are still working the case today, reviewing case files and repeating witness interviews. They frequently distribute flyers with details about the killer's attire and appearance at train stations close to the Miyazawa's residence in the hopes that someone will come forward with fresh information. Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department has offered a 20 million yen reward to anyone who can assist them in solving this 23-year-old mystery. Every year, police gather at the Miyazawa home to pay their respects to the family and make a commitment to never give up on the effort to find their killer. The house is now a family mausoleum for the Miyazawas, boarded up and vacant. The building was recently targeted for demolition by the local council, but the family refused to let that happen. This is such a sad case. It's disturbing how the police haven't still found the perpetrator, even with all the evidence at hand. Friends, what do you think about this case? Please share your ideas and theories about this case with me in the comments. On June 5, 2002, 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was sleeping in her bedroom in Federal Heights, Salt Lake City, Utah. She shared the room with her sister Mary Catherine, but their peaceful night was about to take a terrifying turn. A soft-spoken man armed with a knife climbed through their open window. This woke Mary Catherine, who pretended to be asleep, hoping to protect her sister. The man ordered Elizabeth to be quiet, threatening to harm her if she didn't comply. Terrified, Elizabeth put on her shoes and was taken outside. Mary Catherine waited 2 hours before waking their parents and Lois Smart. She told them someone had taken Elizabeth, but they didn't believe her at first, thinking she might be dreaming. However, after inspecting the bedroom and finding a cut window screen, they realized Mary Catherine was telling the truth. They immediately contacted the authorities, who arrived and questioned Mary Catherine about the kidnapper. Mary Catherine described the man as having dark hair on his head, arms, and hands. Although he spoke quietly, she recognized his voice as familiar, but couldn't remember where she had heard it before. The police used the Rachel alert system to broadcast information about Elizabeth's abduction to the public, seeking their help in finding her. As part of their investigation, the police looked into people who had toured the Smart family's home, which was for sale at the time. They also searched the family's computer to see if Elizabeth had interacted with anyone suspicious online. The day after the kidnapping, Ed and Lois Smart made a heartfelt appeal on national television, pleading for their daughter's safe return. The police searched all night for the suspicious individual, but couldn't find them, so they ruled out the tip as not credible. Another tip came from a milkman who claimed to have seen a man driving a gray Honda or Nissan on Elizabeth Street around the time of her disappearance. He wrote down the license plate number, but when the police checked, they couldn't find any information on it, so they dismissed the tip. Police investigation was complicated by the many people who showed up at the Smart residence soon after Elizabeth's abduction, which could have contaminated any potential evidence. They questioned a man who had contact with Elizabeth before her abduction, but he was released after they determined he wasn't involved. The search for Elizabeth continued, with over 20 volunteer pilots searching the Salt Lake area from the air, but they found nothing. Tracking dogs indicated they had smelled something in Red Butte Canyon, but the police search of that area yielded nothing. Elizabeth's father, Ed, was exhausted from the search and was hospitalized briefly, but he was determined to keep looking for his daughter. He and his wife, Lois, were barely holding on, but they believed Elizabeth was alive and would come home to them. Ed took a polygraph test to aid the investigation, and the police ruled out the possibility that Elizabeth had staged her disappearance or run away. Mark Claus, whose daughter was kidnapped and murdered, reached out to the Smart family to offer support and share his own experiences. He noted that the internet had helped spread the word about Elizabeth's disappearance, which increased the chances of finding her. The police received information about a man named Brett Michael Edmonds, who was seen in the area around the time of Elizabeth's abduction. They searched for him, but he had relocated to New Mexico and Texas. After a chase, they arrested a man they thought was Brett, but it turned out to be the wrong person. The police investigated a man who resembled a suspect in Elizabeth's case, but they determined he was not involved. Meanwhile, they found Brett Michael Edmonds in West Virginia, where he was hospitalized due to an overdose and liver failure. Despite his critical condition, was conscious and able to speak, allowing the police to question him about Elizabeth's abduction. After interviewing him, the police cleared Brett as a suspect. The police then shifted their attention to Richard Albert Ritchie, a 48-year-old man who had worked at Ed Smart's home for 2 months the previous year. Ed Smart had hired Richard and even gave him a 1990 Jeep Cherokee in exchange for his labor, unaware that Richard had a long history of criminal offenses, including burglary, robbery, and attempted murder. Richard Ritchie denied any involvement in Elizabeth's abduction and claimed to have cooperated fully with the police, providing DNA samples and sitting through 26 hours of interviews. Despite an exhaustive search of his home, the police found no evidence linking him to the abduction. As the search for Elizabeth continued, the Smart family received a promising lead when a witness reported seeing a girl matching Elizabeth's description in Nebraska. However, after investigating the report, the police found no connection to Elizabeth's case. The Smart family remained hopeful but cautious, determined to find their daughter while acknowledging the possibility of false leads. They kept an open mind, knowing that every lead, no matter how promising, had to be thoroughly investigated before they could finally be reunited with Elizabeth. Richard Ritchie was accused of burglary, a second-degree felony, and theft, a Class A misdemeanor, for stealing items from a house in Federal Heights on April 4, 2001. He was also charged with theft, a third-degree felony, for stealing jewelry and a perfume bottle, worth $3,500 from the Smart house on June 6, 2001. However, these stolen items were not related to the investigation into Elizabeth Smart's kidnapping. Salt Lake District Attorney David Yoakum announced the charges in a press conference. When Ed Smart confronted Richard Ritchie about the Smart house theft, Ritchie denied it and was subsequently fired. Unfortunately, The police investigation into Elizabeth's abduction suffered a setback in August 2002 when Richard Ritchie, their prime suspect, died from a brainstem injury that caused hemorrhaging. As Ritchie's condition worsened, he lost the ability to communicate or breathe on his own. His family eventually decided to remove him from life support to prevent further suffering. Although Ritchie's death presented a significant challenge to the investigation, the authorities continued their efforts to find Elizabeth Smart's abductor. The investigation into Elizabeth Smart's kidnapping was hindered when the prime suspect was ruled out, causing doubts about the viability of other leads. Around the same time, in August 2002, an 11-year-old girl was brutally attacked and sexually assaulted in her own bedroom. The severity of her injuries was shocking, with every bone in the middle of her face broken. She required surgery, but remained in critical condition. The police arrested a close friend of her father, Javier Sickler, and charged him with burglary, assault, and attempted murder. Sickler claimed to have knocked on the front door of the victim's home, but said he blacked out afterward. Despite initial similarities with Elizabeth Smart's abduction, the police investigated and determined that Javier Sickler was not involved in her kidnapping. As the months passed with no sign of Elizabeth Smart, the police investigating her abduction turned to unorthodox methods to find her. One approach involved consulting psychics who claimed to possess extrasensory perception that could provide clues about her whereabouts. The psychics told investigators that Elizabeth might be found in a crypt in the foothills above Salt Lake City. This lead prompted a Seattle-based company to come forward, stating that over a dozen of its members had pinpointed Elizabeth's body using a specialized psychic technique called technical remote viewing. According to the group, their psychic abilities revealed that Elizabeth had been killed shortly after her abduction. However, when officers searched the specified tomb, they found no evidence of Elizabeth's disappearance. In November 2002, Walter Kenneth Holloway was arrested after falsely claiming to be the kidnapper of Elizabeth Smart. He contacted the Smart family and the Salt Lake Police Department, demanding a $3 million ransom from Ed and Lois Smart in exchange for their daughter's safe return. Holloway threatened to harm Elizabeth if his demands weren't met. However, the police quickly discovered that Holloway was not involved in the abduction and was simply trying to extort money from the Smart family. They tracked him down to South Carolina and cleared him of any involvement in the case. Ed Smart was outraged by the extortion scheme, feeling that it wasted valuable police resources and distracted them from finding his daughter. In October 2002, Mary Catherine, Elizabeth's sister, had a sudden realization. The voice of her sister's abductor sounded like Emmanuel, a man the family had briefly hired to do some yard work and roofing a year earlier. However, the police had doubts about this lead because Emmanuel had only worked for the family for a short time. A lot of time had passed since the abduction, and Mary Catherine had only heard the abductor's voice briefly. Despite their skepticism, the family worked with a sketch artist to draw a picture of Emmanuel based on their descriptions. The sketch was finally released in February 2003 and was featured on several TV shows, including Larry King Live and America's Most Wanted. A relative of a man named Brian David Mitchell recognized the sketch and contacted the police, providing them with recent photos of him. These photographs enabled authorities to confirm that the sketch was an accurate representation of Brian David Mitchell. On March 12, 2003, two couples in Sandy, Utah spotted Brian David Mitchell with a woman and a girl. Recognizing him from news photos as Elizabeth Smart's abductor, they immediately called the police. Brian David Mitchell was accompanied by his wife, Wanda Barzee, when he was found with Elizabeth Smart. The police were quickly alerted and sent to the scene, where they safely rescued Elizabeth Smart and took Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee into custody. After her rescue, Elizabeth's testimony revealed a disturbing account of her 9-month ordeal. She described being taken to a hidden encampment outside Salt Lake City, where she met Wanda Barzee, who played a significant role in her captivity. The camp was a makeshift shelter surrounded by dense foliage, carefully camouflaged to avoid detection. Elizabeth Smart described Wanda Barzee as initially caring and nurturing, offering comfort and warmth. However, as time passed, Barzee's behavior changed, and she began to exert control over Elizabeth. She forced Elizabeth to follow their unusual religious beliefs, insisting that she pray, read scriptures, and participate in religious rituals. One of the most distressing experiences Elizabeth endured during her captivity was being forced to marry Brian David Mitchell. Barzee threatened Elizabeth with physical harm if she refused to comply. The wedding ceremony, which Mitchell claimed was a symbol of eternal love, was actually a sham with no legal basis. It solely served as a means for Mitchell to assert his dominance over Elizabeth. After being forced into a marriage, Brian David Mitchell assaulted Elizabeth. He justified his actions by claiming to be a king, ordained to kidnap virgin brides to fight against the Antichrist. Mitchell believed Elizabeth was the first of many virgins he would abduct, and that she would join him in this fictional battle. During her captivity, Elizabeth suffered unimaginable abuse to prevent her escape. She was chained to a tree with a metal cable, restricting her movement outside her tent. This constant confinement made her feel trapped and helpless, unable to seek freedom. In addition to physical restraint, Elizabeth was also subjected to psychological manipulation. She was forced to take on a new identity, choosing the name Esther after the biblical figure. This name change symbolized the loss of her own identity and the control exerted over her by Mitchell and his accomplice, Wanda Barzee. Elizabeth suffered severe trauma during her captivity, particularly due to the frequent and repeated sexual assaults by Brian David Mitchell, which occurred multiple times a day. This abuse left her deeply traumatized and fearful. In addition to the sexual abuse, Elizabeth was forced to look at explicit materials, which further worsened her trauma and feelings of degradation. Moreover, she lived in constant fear of violence and death, as Brian David Mitchell regularly threatened to kill her. This perpetual state of fear and uncertainty amplified the abuse she endured, leaving her feeling utterly overwhelmed and powerless. To gain more control over Elizabeth, Mitchell would often force her to consume alcohol and drugs. He used these substances to reduce her ability to resist him and make her more vulnerable to his control. As a result, Elizabeth was frequently disoriented and helpless, making it easier for her abusers to commit their atrocious acts. After a lengthy legal process, Wanda Barzee admitted to her role in Elizabeth's kidnapping and was sentenced to 15 years in both state and federal prison, with the sentences to be served concurrently. In 2016, her federal sentence was terminated, and she was transferred from a Texas prison to a Utah prison to begin serving her state sentence. When Wanda Barzee was set to be released in September 2018, Elizabeth Smart, who had become a child safety advocate, strongly objected to her release. Elizabeth believed that Barzee still posed a threat to others, as she had never shown remorse for her actions or any signs of rehabilitation. Despite Elizabeth's protests, Wanda Barzee was released from prison. Elizabeth Smart's protest attracted extensive media attention and brought to light the ongoing concerns about the release of convicted criminals from prison. After a lengthy legal battle, Brian David Mitchell was finally sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping Elizabeth. At his sentencing hearing, Elizabeth took the opportunity to confront her kidnapper directly, delivering a powerful and emotional statement. In her statement, Elizabeth described the immense pain and trauma Mitchell had inflicted upon her, explaining that the 9 months she spent in captivity had stolen a part of her life that she could never recover. Despite this horrific experience, Elizabeth demonstrated remarkable resilience and determination, assuring Mitchell that she would go on to live a good life, unperturbed by the darkness he had brought into her world. The case of Lin family. Min Lin and Yoon Lin's romance began in the late 1980s when they met at an Australian university. They both came from China and had moved to Australia to further their studies. Min had completed her bachelor's degree and was doing an internship, while Yoon participated in a student exchange program. They met each other after meeting accidentally in the university hallway. After graduating, they got married and settled in North Epping, Sydney, where their love continued to grow into a strong, close-knit family. Min and Yoon had their first child, Brenda Lin, in August 1994. She was mostly known as Brenda. Their son, Henry, was born in 1997, and their youngest child, Terry, was born in February. At the start of the February, Min and Yoon decided to start a business, opening a small newsroom. Through their hard work, it became a successful news agency with a publishing arm on Rose Street. The Lin family's business success had brought them economic security, a spacious house, a luxury car, and good education for their children. Min had handled business affairs, while Yoon had focused on taking care of their home and children. Neighbors had respected the Lin family for their hard work and kindness. As parents, Min and Yoon had been appreciated for their care and love for their children. They had never quarreled. Their children had been very obedient and close-knit. Brenda, the eldest daughter, had stood out for her beauty, good academic performance, and kindness towards animals. Henry and Terry, two sons, had been both active and loved sports, especially soccer. As the Lin family had settled into life in Australia and their assets had increased, they had begun bringing relatives from China to live with them. In the early 2000s, Min's parents had been the first to move to North Epping and had helped with childcare. A few years later, Yun's parents also moved to Sydney suburb, with Min and Yun buying them a small house. Yun's sister, Irene, came to live with the Lin family, assisting with household chores and the children. By this time, the Lin family business was generating substantial income, reportedly nearing $1 million annually. In late 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy, and her husband, Robert, moved to Australia in search of better opportunities. They had visited before and briefly lived in Melbourne but had returned to China. This time, they were determined to settle in Australia for good. Robert was a former successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to try his hand at entrepreneurship. He and his wife invested all their savings in a restaurant in Sydney, but the business struggled and eventually closed. Robert's subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed due to his lack of business skills and financial management experience. Lin's family had a habit of meeting every Friday night. Their last family gathering took place on July 17, 2009, at Kathy Inman's parents' home. The next morning, July 18th, the Lin family's store had not been open, making longtime customers feel surprised and confused. This sudden closure had raised their concerns. One of them tried to contact Min multiple times but was unsuccessful, so they called Min's sister Kathy to see if she knew what was going on. Kathy was surprised and worried because her brother never closed the shop without making arrangements first. Kathy tried to call Min and Yoon, but they didn't answer. She also tried calling their home phone, but no one picked up. Kathy and her husband Robert were worried, so they decided to visit Min's house to make sure everything was okay. They arrived around 9 a.m. and saw the family car. They went to the house. The front door was unlocked, but there was no sign of Min or his family inside. Kathy went upstairs. When she opened the bedroom door, she was shocked by what she saw. The room was covered in blood, including the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. Yuan Lin's body was on the floor near the bed, and she had been severely mutilated. Kathy screamed and stumbled backward, was shocked by the gruesome scene. In the room next to where Irene slept, a terrible scene took place. Irene lay motionless on the bed, her face beaten and bruised. The bedrooms of Henry, 12, and Terry, 9, also revealed horrifying scenes. Both were brutally beaten to death. Their bodies were found in separate corners of the room. Min Lin's body was found in his bedroom, covered with a blanket soaked in blood. He was killed in the same way as his family. It seems he was the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and then the two boys. Kathy immediately contacted emergency services. After Kathy's urgent call, Robert left to fetch the Lin's parents, who lived about 10 kilometers from the crime scene. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, encountering what they described as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had witnessed. Tragically, the Lin family members were all killed. Each person died from multiple blows to the head with a heavy blunt object similar to a hammer. However, the crime weapon was not found at the scene. The initial examination of the crime scene did not reveal any important clues. The killer did not leave the murder weapon behind, and they did not take any valuables or money. This suggests that the main goal was to kill the Lin family, not to steal from them. At first, investigators thought there might be multiple attackers because it seemed unlikely that one person could overpower so many people. However, evidence showed that the children were awake during the attack and tried to escape. There were blood stains and splatters throughout the house. Oddly, all adult victims had head injuries and showed signs of strangulation. Investigators found identical bloody shoe prints in each room with a tread pattern. Although they could not identify the shoe brand, they determined the shoe size. No fingerprints were found, suggesting the killer or killers wore gloves. Initially, the police had no leads or theories about the perpetrator's identity. Friends and neighbors of the Lin family all said that the family had no known enemies, making the motive for the brutal massacre unclear. The attack occurred between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lin, the eldest child and now sole survivor of the Lin family, was attending school in New Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She learned about the incident through social media and initially did not believe it was related to her family, but the truth devastated her. Brenda soon received a call from her Aunt Kathy, who tearfully confirmed the devastating news. Brenda was immediately flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert met her at the airport. She then moved in with them, as her family's home was closed off as a crime scene. The following day, Brenda was taken to the police station, overcome with grief, to be questioned. However, she had no new information to share. stressing that her family had no enemies and hadn't noticed anything unusual before her trip. After her family's passing, Brenda inherited a significant fortune, including property and the family business. Since she was still a minor and in school, her guardians, Kathy and Robert, took on the responsibility of managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her caregivers. Robert even threatened to take legal action if the grandparents sought custody, claiming they were too old to care for a teenager. The matter was eventually resolved, with Brenda remaining in the care of her aunt and uncle. The Lynn's shop and publishing business reopened under new management after a temporary closure. However, Brenda had not yet taken over the business operations. Robert began reviewing the family's financial records, including bank accounts, savings, and real estate. Beside that, experts thoroughly investigated the crime scene, documenting every detail, but no concrete leads were found. They believed the killer acted alone and entered the house quietly, possibly threw in with a key. The killer wore size 9.5 shoes with a distinctive tread pattern and likely used a hammer as the lethal weapon, which was never found. The killer wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints or foreign DNA behind. One notable detail was the presence of blood stains on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the killings occurred, indicating the killer's bloody gloves had touched them. However, there were no blood stains on Brenda's room doorknob, suggesting the killer knew she was not present. The Lynn family tragedy received extensive media coverage. However, with no concrete evidence or suspects, numerous implausible theories surfaced. Speculation about the family's supposed vast wealth leading to their murder. As the investigation had stalled, no suspects had emerged for the probe. The theory of a robbery had eventually been abandoned because the killer had left money and valuables intact, suggesting the sole motive had been to kill family members. Furthermore, the fact that the house had lost power on the night of the murder suggested that the murderer had been someone who was familiar with the location of the electrical panel. The attacker's ability to control the house in darkness showed that he had prior knowledge of the house's layout. When reviewing the case, an investigator replayed Kathy's emergency call, looking for missed clues. An important hint was detected in the recording. The recording captured Kathy's frantic attempts to explain the situation, her words interrupted by crying and sobbing. At the end of the call, Kathy mentioned her husband's name and talked to him in Cantonese. This piqued the investigators' interest, causing them to translate her words. The translation revealed that Kathy was pleading with Robert not to leave Kathy home alone. This was significant since Robert had left Kathy at the scene of the crime to pick up her parents, despite the potential danger. With 5 people brutally murdered and the killer possibly still inside, Robert's calm aroused suspicion, as if he already knew for certain that Kathy was safe. The police finally identified Robert as the main suspect. A crucial discovery was that Robert had a key to Min's house, which had been given to Robert shortly before the tragedy. However, Robert never mentioned this during questioning, and his wife Kathy was unaware that Min had given him the key. It was Brenda who unintentionally revealed this important information to investigators. Further investigation showed that Robert's claim of being a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor was false. Although he had a medical degree, he had never had a stable job in the field. There were rumors that he had fled to Australia to avoid punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, Robert failed to establish a successful career and wasted his remaining savings on unsuccessful business ventures. After moving to North Keeping, he became idle, relying on his wife's income. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as if he had inherited the Lynn family's estate. His first move was to force Yun's parents out of their home, which Min had bought for them. Although the house remained in Min's name, Min and Kathy's parents were still allowed to stay in their own home that was also purchased for them. Based on this information, investigators suspected he had a long-standing plot to usurp Man family property, money, and profitable business. However, the police could not arrest Robert yet due to a lack of concrete evidence. Through a combination of interrogation, surveillance, and other methods, the investigation team was granted permission to install hidden cameras in the Robert household. They hoped to gather the evidence needed to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, starting with an unexpected revelation from Kathy during an interrogation. Kathy mentioned Robert's preference for a specific brand of shoes. A few years ago, Robert bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers that he really liked. He had worn out one pair and thrown it away, but kept the other pair at home. What's important to note is that Robert's shoe size, 9.5, matched the size of the shoes worn by the killers. The crucial evidence was caught on a hidden camera, which showed Robert deliberately destroying the box that held the remaining pair of shoes. A search warrant was issued for Robert's home. During the search, police found a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers with the same pattern as the pattern collected at the crime scene. In the garage, they discovered a small blood stain, which was later confirmed by a forensic examiner to be a blood stain containing DNA from all 5 victims of the Lynn family, linking it to the crime scene. In May 2011, 2 years after the tragedy, Robert was officially arrested. He denied involvement, claiming the blood stains in his garage appeared after returning from Lynn's house following the tragedy. He also downplayed the importance of the sneakers, saying they were new and he threw away the old shoes. While in prison awaiting trial, Robert shared a cell with a number of informants whom the police had arranged. During a conversation, he confessed to carefully planning the crime and covering his tracks. He bought the weapon in a store without surveillance cameras and gave his wife tea so she wouldn't wake up while he was committing the crime. He removed the hammer, shoes, gloves, and clothes so police would never find them. At trial, Robert denied everything. The only evidence against him is what the informant said and some indirectly clues. The jury failed to find Robert guilty, and he was released on bail in December 2015. But when the trial resumed in June 2016, another informant said Robert had confessed to being haunted by Brenda since she was 13 years old. Brenda was questioned again and tearfully said Robert forced her to have sex when she first moved in. She kept silent about the abuse for years because she was afraid of what Robert might do. With this new information and other evidence, Robert was officially convicted of all charges. He was given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 1 for each murder. All of his appeals were rejected,